Hey, welcome, buddy. It is the Sunday Show. Yeah, the Sunday Show. You know the name called the Sunday Show because I couldn't think of anything better because I have no creativity. So, anyways, welcome everybody. I hope we have a lot of people watching today. I got a special guest for us. Yes, Rationality Rules, aka Steve. He is here to talk about, well, atheism, our favorite subject. Even though most of us, are kind of like all over the place on this issue, and I know it's been brought up many, many times. But one of his friends, CosmicSkeptic, had a video on this the other day. I've watched it, and I really think the world of Alex. I love his videos. Oh, we got some feedback here, so hang on. Richard, I'm going to mute you for a second here. And this is just to discuss some of the things that I thought with the video I disagreed with, because I really love Alex's videos. But on this particular one, I may think he missed the mark a little bit. So we're going to discuss that and get everybody's opinion on it. And then we're going to go into some other things. So anyway, Steve, welcome to the Great Debate Community Sunday Show.
Thank you very much for having me here. It should be a fun discussion. Great
yeah,
start.
How bad could it be, right? Talking about theology to a bunch of atheist, agnostic, and theist, because we have a eclectic group here. So, anyways, his video. Okay, I don't even know where to begin on this because he had messaged me that I might have missed the mark. Okay, fair enough. It happens. But he said that he wasn't saying that all agnostics are atheists, and yet at the very end of his video, he says, hey, you're an agnostic? Great, but you're also an atheist. Now, I just found out recently, agree with that, right?
Yes, I do agree with that, yeah.
Okay.
So I should probably make my position clear as well.
Yeah, go ahead, by all means.
Thank you, yeah. No, I'm actually going to chat with Alex tomorrow. Enough to have the cool guy close to phone. Because there's aspects of which he said that I don't agree with. So I agreed with about 80 to 90% of what he said, but I'm going to have a conversation with him about the other part, because he's a very smart man. He probably convince me, or he may not. I think he probably won't, because the criticism, the objection that I have will probably stand, but we'll find out. But when it comes to the rest of his video, I accept it. And one of the biggest points, it seems that you don't accept. So it will be interesting to see why you don't accept it, why I do accept it. Maybe you can convince me otherwise.
Well, let's see here. Okay, first of all, let me say what I liked about his video that I do agree with. How about that? I do agree with him that atheism is underrepresented in the political spectrum. And I do agree that there is a argument to be made by having more people say they're atheists for demographic purposes, especially for political power. I get that, okay? However, there are people out there that are ichtheists. There are people out there, theological cognitivists. There are people that are agnostic that don't fall under the very narrow definition of atheism, which is a belief claim. It is the belief that God does not exist. Now, somebody wants to use the more broad definition, right, of a lack of belief. Okay, that's fine. But you can't, my argument is you can't take that particular broad definition and apply it ubiquitously to everybody else and say, well, if you're an agnostic, you're also an atheist, because I'm living proof that I'm not an atheist, but I'm a temporal agnostic.
Yeah, I can appreciate that that viewpoint. You also sent me a few links beforehand where you were saying that most academic sources say that atheism is the active disbelief in God. Would that be a correct way to represent it?
Yeah, a disbelief or a rejection of the claim, or a belief that God does not exist, or ontologically speaking, there are no gods in the universe.
Yeah, you see, so the position that I'm in, and I think Alex is in the same, is that you basically have Gnosticism and agnosticism, which go towards what you know, and then you have theism and atheism, which go to what you believe. So if you believe in a god, you're a theist, or gods, you're a theist. Anything else, including I don't know, you're technically an atheist. So you can have different ranges of agnosticism, like how likely it is in your head that, there's no gods or God. But you're still an atheist, because you have to believe in something. You have to believe in the God to be a theist, or believe in a God to be a theist. So it sounds like from the outset we've got a disagreement on definitions. So immediately we get bogged down into semantics and what definition is the most applicable. Would that sound like?
To some degree, however,
do you agree with that?
No, because I don't think it's a definitional thing. Anybody can have any definition they want. And by the way, people in the live chat, they're kind of, some of them know who you are and some of them do not. Link to Rationality Rules videos or his YouTube channel is a video description. Go check it out. Sub to him. Please sub to him. I want to make sure he gets some subs out of this. He has some great videos. He has some great conversations. Very, very articulate and well-read individual. So having him on is actually a really big deal right now. I mean, I followed your stuff for quite a few, and I really like the engagements you've had with people. They're honest. They're upfront. They're just what I believe to be a good way to have a dialogue. Okay, so go check out his channel.
It's very kind.
So yeah, go check it out, guys.
Steve,
seriously.
I'd like.
Well, let me address a question real quick. Then you're going to go ahead and take over. I just want to answer directly about definitionals. The issue is when you have something like theism, the direct logical negation is not theist. Okay, so you have theism and not theism. Not theism is coextensive with theism. You can't have one without the other. Okay, so if you're not a theist, you are a non-theist because of just a complementary set, right? Anything that's not theist is a non-theist. Now, under non-theism, that's where we generally put these other positions, like agnosticism, ichtheism, theological cognitivist. All these other positions are under the header of the umbrella of non-theism. Now, what Silverman wants to do, and I think the doctor here earlier, Nicola, had actually said that Silverman knows that this is not the correct way to do it, but he doesn't really care because it's for demographics. But what they want to do is they want to put atheism as that general large header. And even Alex had mentioned this in his video. He wants to be the master category, he puts it. But it's not.
Well, to clarify, it's not that it's not correct to do this. There's no correct or incorrect definitions,
right.
Realistically speaking. He's aware that a standard academic use of the word atheism is something different than how he chooses to define it. He chooses to treat atheism as being equivalent of not theism, and it is for political purposes, like just for broadening the demographic.
I see. So quite a few bits put on the table there. I'm just trying to think of the best way to address it. Okay, so there isn't absolute definitions. That's just not the way that words work. But there are more accurate definitions, as in that is in general which the population accepts. Like if you talk to atheists and you say, "Hey, do you either A, just don't think that there's a God," which would be a lack of theism, or B, do you think that there is absolutely no God or that there is no God? Most atheists will have the former. So while academic sources might reference saying that it's the active disbelief in God, if you want to have a conversation with someone, if your goal is honesty and rational discourse, then take the most popular. That's what people mean when they're saying atheist.
But is it the most popular?
The second thing is that you were bridging into where you were speaking about the best label, actually where I have a disagreement with Alex. I don't think atheist is the best label. I think non-religious is the best label, and I can explain why if you like. Or
yes, please. I think I'm going to agree with you on this.
Sure. So I have a few notes, as is the way that I prefer to do things. But 6 minutes in, Alex states that if you're a vegan and someone asks you what kind of meat do you eat, the correct answer is not salad, it's none. And likewise, if someone asks you what your religious affiliation is and you don't have one, the correct answer is not humanism. That's describing something that you are. It's evasive. The correct answer is none. Now, so far, I don't disagree at all. He's right. The answer is none. Religious, not atheist, non-religious. That's basically where I'm coming in from it, because essentially, hang on, what I'll do is I'll quickly go back again. The next sentence that he follows that up with is, similarly to how Catholics, Baptists and Anglicans are more than happy to be referred to by their master category of Christianity, humanists, freethinkers and atheists and agnostic non-believers should be equally happy to be referred to by their master category, atheism. I disagree with that because it's just not accurate. You get humanists and freethinkers that are not atheists. Example would be a free-thinking Buddhist. Most Buddhists don't believe in a God, so they are by definition an atheist. But they can also be a freethinker. So I don't think that atheist is the best term. I think it's better in the West, but it's not very useful when it comes to the East. That's just a conversation that I'm going to have with Alex, and he may convince me otherwise. But that's where my problem with his most recent video is. Outside of that, I completely agree with everything that he was saying. So it's up to you where you want to take this and
sure.
what parts you want to discuss.
There's so many things I partly agree with and partly disagree with, right? When you
Can
say
I
like
say something?
Yeah, go ahead, Nestle.
I think labels aren't sometimes they are useful, but often they're not. For example, if you ask somebody, "Are you religious?" A Christian might reply, "No, I'm not religious. I'm Christian," because they don't include their religion as a religion. Do you understand that? Because the words can mean different things to different people. So it's better to ask, instead of asking, "Are you an atheist?" it's better to ask, "Do you believe in God or not?" For example.
Well, yeah, I do agree with that. Oh, go ahead, Stefan.
See, I appreciate what you're saying there, that, you know, people who are Christian will say that they're non-religious because that's the way that they see religion and that's the way that they see Christianity. But if you take the broader scope, most Christians, if you say, "Are you religious?" they will say, "Yes, I'm a Christian."
Yeah, most.
Now, the fact that there's exceptions, we don't need to retard language and pretend that we can't discuss these things because there's exceptions to rules. Most Christians believe that there is a God up there, or maybe not up there, but there is a God, and that Jesus was real, and that there was an actual sacrifice. You will find Christians that don't believe that, but that doesn't mean that we can have to say now that Christianity is a useless label. And even if it did, labels are necessary.
Yeah, I'm not saying that labels are useless. I'm saying in some cases they can lead to misleading conclusions. For example, if you take a poll and ask, "Are you an atheist?" you might get not the results you are wanting. For example, if you take the definition of atheism as the lack of belief, I'm sorry, Steve, but go with this for a moment, as a lack of belief, then you and ask people, "Are you an atheist?" and you might get different results than you are wanting. For example, most who hear the word atheist might not take that definition as a lack of belief.
Yeah, I appreciate that problem, and I would say that atheist does have that. The word atheist is just ridiculed. There's just so many problems with the word atheist.
Yeah.
So I know where you're coming from there. For example, if you ask Steve, you know, "Are you an atheist?" he will say no, because his definition of atheism is different to mine.
Yeah.
Me, is Steve an atheist? I'd say yes, he is. So really it becomes a debate on which word or which definition is the best to use and why. So maybe you want to make your case, Steve, as to why you would define atheism to be the positive assertion that there is no because
it may one small thing. It may help. I wrote something on the Great Debate Community Wiki about the word atheism. Maybe that will help. But go ahead, Steve.
Let's
sure. If you send me a link or something.
Yeah, would you do that? Can you send me that, Nestle? Because I like pretty much what you wrote on that on the Great Debate Wiki. We have our own wiki thing. Isn't that cool?
Hey, Stephen. I would like to ask you something.
Well, let me ask you this question first. If not, we're not going to get bogged down. Because he asked me a question, so let me at least get the answer out.
Cool.
And then we'll get back to you, Richard. And so you asked, which is a better definition, and I think that the question is more, which is a more useful definition. But let's see what we agree upon. Do you agree there's more than one definition of atheism? There's generally a broad and there's generally a narrow, right?
Yeah.
And the broad would be a lack of belief.
Yeah.
Okay. In academics, do you agree that...
Sorry, so can you say that last bit again? You're saying there's a broad and a narrow, and the broad is that...
The broad is a lack of belief. Anybody who lacks a belief is an atheist.
Lacks a belief
now we're going
God.
to go...
In God, yeah.
So yeah, like now we're going into exception. What do you mean by lack of belief? Because some would define lack of belief as the assertion that there is none, whereas some would say that lack of belief is just that you don't have a belief.
Well, anyone who, like myself, who asserts or takes the position that they believe there is no God, I obviously lack a belief that there is one.
Right.
I just happen to go a bit further than them, so I am included within that definition of lacking a belief.
All people that believe there's no God inherently lack a belief in God. That they have, you can't have one without. You can't have belief without lack of belief, but you can have lack of belief without saying I believe God does not exist. Does that make sense? If I say I believe God does not exist as a positive assertion, I automatically also lack a belief in God. However, the contra is not necessarily true. If I say I lack a belief in God, I am not necessarily asserting I believe that there's no God.
Yeah. The easy analogy of this would be that dog entails mammal, but mammal doesn't entail dog.
Yes, exactly. That's the case.
Okay, sure. Yeah. I agree with that. So we have to go, okay, why do I think that the philosophical definition of atheism, which has been a belief that God does not exist, is better? Because I think it's more a better answer to the question. If I say, hey, Steve, what do you want for dinner? And you say, oh, I don't want chicken, right? That doesn't tell me what you want. That's not answering the question. It doesn't tell me anything about what your belief actually is. When I say, when I say what's your belief in regards to God and the ontological existence of his nature in the universe, I'm asking you, do you believe that the universe is devoid of gods, essentially? That's what I want to know, and not if you lack a belief. I want to know if you believe God does not exist or you believe God does exist.
You see, I think your question there is malformed. You're not asking me, what do I want for dinner? You're saying, do you want chicken? And I'm saying, no, I do not want chicken.
No.
That's my position.
No, because one's an open question, one's a closed question. I'm asking you an open question. Yeah. If I say, do you want chicken, that's a closed question. You only have to answer yes or no.
That's what theism is. It's a closed question. It's, do you believe in a god or gods? If your answer is yes, you're a theist. If your answer is anything else, it's no.
No, you're not theist.
The equivalent. So the equivalent of you saying to me, what do you want for dinner? Analogy would be, what is your religion? Then I can answer with, if I was to say not Christianity, that would make your criticism here legit, but that's not the question I see being posed. The question is, here is the assertion that there is a god or gods. Do you accept this evidence? Do you accept that this assertion is true? And I'm just saying no.
But that only gets you to non-theism.
I am an atheist.
If you're going to have a dichotomy, the dichotomy is going to be theism and non-theism. You can't have this disjunction of theism and atheism. What you're saying is, look at P or not P, right? So if I say P, you're not a theist. Now you're jumping to atheism, but the reality is, if you say no, I'm not a theist, the best you can come up with is you're not a theist, right? So you're not theist. Now
have you heard Matt Dillahunty's example on this? When he says about the court of law.
I vaguely. I mean, we have a lawyer in here, but
for those that haven't, as a refresher, court, and you have a jury. The case is presented saying that they want to present that this person is guilty. Now, as a jury, you vote on, or you come to a decision on whether or not he's guilty or not guilty, not whether or not he's guilty or innocent. The same as with atheism. The assertion is that a God exists, and as the jury, you're saying God exists, or how would you put it? It's because you're not saying that God does not exist. You're just saying that the assertion, the claim, has failed to meet its burden of proof, and so you stand as an atheist.
But I think that actually works against you in this particular case, because if you say, yeah, because I think it's like, you know exactly what I'm going to say on this, because I think that when you're saying you're not guilty, you're not saying you're innocent, and yet when you say you're an atheist because you don't subscribe to theism, that's exactly the same objection I'm raising.
How do you define this goes to the atheism definition. This is the problem, because I just say, to me, atheism is such a word. It's a word that should not exist. It's like a Bigfootism. If I say to you, hey, here's an assertion that Bigfoot exists, and you say, well, I'm not convinced of that, I won't say that, the position a Bigfootist assertion that there is no Bigfoot, because that's not what you're saying. You're just saying that you just don't buy that claim. You don't think the evidence is legit.
To help you, Steve, he is using atheism to mean synonymous with non-theism.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Yeah, I understand that, and that's the big objection I have. And atheism is not the same as non-theism. Again, the dichotomy is theism or not theism. The disjunction would be theism or atheism, and then he's saying if you're not theist, you're atheist. That is P or Q, not Q, therefore P, which is logically sound, or logically correct, but not sound, because that is not the dichotomy. The theism and atheism are not the dichotomy there. We don't want beliefs to be dichotomous. We want the theist to be dichotomous with non-theist. Then under non-theism, we have people that will be non-theists for various reasons, right? If you say I'm an ichtheist and you say, look, I don't even know what the hell word God means. What is God, right? you can't automatically assign them to atheism because they've not rejecting the proposition. They're just saying, I don't even know what you mean by this. You can't label them atheist.
I think you still miss one point because go ahead.
Well, I think Sokka was waiting.
I just want to add one thing is that when everyone who, if you don't assert that you believe in God, wouldn't everyone else technically not accept the proposition? Like if you say, do you believe in God? You say yes, you're a theist. No matter what else your answer is, won't that make you not atheist?
It would. If you say if you say you're not a theist, you are a non-theist. But if you're rejecting the proposition, right, P, right, the belief in the proposition, and you say that proposition is false, you're saying B, not P. So you're saying I believe that proposition to be false. That's what it is in academics of what atheism means. They're both belief claims. One is BP, one is B, not P.
No, but my objection, what I'm trying to elaborate on is that non-theism and atheism, some of us are using that synonymous terms.
Yeah.
And if someone says, I believe a God exists, and says yes to that, then they are a theist. But my contention is that if you say anything else other than yes, I don't care, I don't know, whatever. If you say anything other than yes, then you are in fact a non-theist. And I think
that's true. Oh, absolutely. I think we all agree
on that. An atheist is synonymous to non-theism.
That's the problem. That's where we get it. That's where the disagreement lies.
If we extend the court of law, analogy, then it's kind of like the difference between acquittal and exoneration. Acquittal just means we don't have enough information to make a determination, which is patently the case.
No,
whereas if it's exoneration, we have enough information to say that is not the case.
Well, no. When you're in court, I think the court analogy does play well here because you're only evaluating guilt. Because the person, it's true. There's a dichotomy between guilt and innocence. The person is true. The person is either guilty or innocent. But they're only asking the jury in the court to evaluate guilt. Do you believe the person is guilty or non-guilty? So, for instance, in the OJ case, they found OJ to be not guilty because the evidence improved guilt, but no one believes he was innocent. And that's kind of what's going on here. We're saying, God is not guilty of existing, but we're not saying that he doesn't exist.
But the way I'm looking at it is, if you're saying guilty,
in a criminal court or a civil court.
Well, hang on. If you say guilty, the best you can come up with is not guilty. But what I see is people saying anybody who says they're not guilty means innocent, because the dichotomy is guilty or not guilty. Same thing as theism or not theism.
There's a distinction between there's a distinction in court. There's a distinction between voting not guilty and thinking.
I understand it, Ness. You're not listening to what I have to say.
Not guilty does not mean innocent.
That's my argument. If you say not guilty, you cannot say that they're innocent, and this is what I'm seeing happening here. Just because you say you're not theist doesn't mean you're atheist. It means you're not theist. That's the dichotomy.
No. This is the problem.
No.
Atheist to mean the assertion that he's innocent, for example. It's almost like a tautology. I see the word atheist to be synonymous with non-theism, and you don't. You see it to mean something else, like the assertion that he's innocent, or the assertion that there is no God. So we're just back to square one. I think if I was to say the word a Bigfootist or a fairyist, I'm not saying that I would not think that word means that someone's asserting that there's absolutely no fairies. I'll just say that it's synonymous with non-fairyist or non-Bigfootist. I see it's basically off the same definition in my mind. That's how it works. And
Sokka, you want to jump in, Sokka?
You define themselves in it. When you speak to people who define themselves as atheist, they use the definition that I'm using, which is the synonymous version of non-theism. So, yeah, it seems that we're on semantic, definitional ground here, and it really is all built completely on how atheism is defined. Whereas I want to say that atheism is defined by what people genuinely mean by atheist. If you ask Matt Dillahunty, if you ask activist Sam Harris, if you ask Richard Dawkins, they won't tell you they're saying the assertion that they're saying that there is no God. They will say they have a lack of belief in God. So, and if you ask people like myself, just general people that are interested in atheism, most people will tell you they don't know that there's no God or gods. They're just saying that the position is, well, the position that I take, it's synonymous with non-theism. So if you want to have a conversation with people, it seems best to accept the words that they're using, because words are frivolous. They always change. It's just, that's the nature of words. Shouldn't it be best?
Please. Because
Right.
so first off, okay, Steve, other Steve, new Steve.
Can we call him Stefano or Rationality? Because he has a PH rather than a V. How do we differentiate? Stefan?
Steven.
He's like, I don't do Stefan. No.
I'll be Steven for this.
Steven, call him Steven. There we go.
Okay.
I'm Steve. He's Steven. Yeah.
Okay. So Stephen, first off, to your main point, or to one of your main points there, which is about we should use the word in the context that's being used. Great. Then what you should do is you should adopt the belief or the definition that atheism is those that believe that no gods exist, because that is the common usage of the word. If you take a look at the polls that they do, where they try to find what people's religious denominations are, religious beliefs out there, you'll notice that, for example, within the United States, 20% of people recognize as non-religious, while 3% recognize as atheist. Now, if that's the case, where there is a distinction that large of the population, that the majority of them are recognizing as rather than atheists as non-religious, then it's, if you want to go with whatever the popular use of the word is, you go with the use of the word that those majority of people are using. I understand that within the atheist movement, where you have guys like Matt Dillahunty and David Silverman and Aaron Roth that want to use this definition of atheism in a synonymous way with non-theism, but that is actually the minority position. So let's go with what the people are saying. I agree with you. And if the people that's what we're saying, if you take a look at the way that the demographics break down, they agree that atheism is a more of an extreme position than non-religious or non-theism. Okay, so that's just the first part right there. But I understand with the arguments that you're putting out there. I understand the viewpoint on this, because on the surface, regardless of whether
before you go on the second point, can I address that first point real quick? Because that first point is like horribly wrong, but I just want to make sure we address it.
I think it's spot on. I think it's definitely right.
It's actually exactly right. So go pull up while we're talking, MP, go pull up the demographics and then we can talk about it. Okay, the next point on this is the use of the word. I understand why these words can be used as synonyms with each other, because functionally there is no difference between someone who lacks a belief in God and someone who does not believe in God. The worldviews that they have, the series of beliefs that they do have, are not influenced by a belief in God, which means that the way that they doctrine their lives is almost identical to each other. So on the surface, there's really nothing that separates somebody regardless of what definition that they want to use. And so that's fine. So that's why some of the confusion comes up here. The main problem that people have within these definitions, though, is that atheism, in a philosophical sense, is someone who believes that no gods exist. Now, on the colloquial way that we use this, where that you can put people that do not believe or lack a belief or whatever they're, the way that we just want to address them as a large group of people. I understand the desire to try to group people into a large group, because that way, we do have a better chance of getting representation for views that we have to be heard in things like government. So there is a practical use to the broad definition of atheism, and it's not wrong. Like, that's the thing, is that no one's arguing for a definition to be right and this definition is wrong, people that use this are wrong or anything like that. I understand the different usages of these words, of the words and how we use it. So yes, in a common everyday parlance, when we are talking about these things, whether you don't believe or you lack a belief or you do believe that no gods exist, functionally it's all the same. We can use that term. And if people want to adopt the level of atheism for this, so that you can branch agnostics and atheists and theological non-cognitivists and all this into a larger group so they can get better representation, that's fine. But at the end of the day, there is a better definition, or a more sufficient definition, that actually does illustrate the position in philosophical discourse. Now, if we're not having a philosophical discourse, then that's fine. We can stick to the broad definition. But let's not kid ourselves and say that other definition has no relevance whatsoever within conversation.
Sure.
Okay. Do you want to object, or?
I have a series of objections.
All right, go ahead.
Objection first. So if you would like to go first, that's fine.
You're the guest, so you have privilege to
let's Stephen talk. I know what Nestle had to say. I know what MP has to say. I know what Salk has to say. Yeah. So please go ahead, Stephen.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to see the polls that you're referencing, because I have a sneaky suspicion that you're extrapolating from them not more than what the polls themselves are saying. If people describe themselves as atheist or as non-religious, you can't tell exactly what they think that word means, unless you do have papers, you do have objective reference.
I'll pull them up. The poll, the Gallup poll results in this. They asked a series of questions regarding what is their religious denomination, and in the possible answers, there was people that recognized as non-religious and people that recognized as atheists. Those were two possible options that people could pick, and the majority of the population that recognized religious obviously took that one over the atheist definition.
This is
his mic just not? Is his mic a little off right now, or is that just mine?
Yeah. So can my mic is a bit off. Can I make one quick point now?
Sure.
About I think I must not use an analogy. Take for example, you have a minority group who believe in something, and let's call the group the group defines themselves with the word Babel. For example, just an analogy. Should we go with the definition that the minority uses, or with the definition that the majority uses? Because I think we should go with the minority that uses the term to define themselves, to label themselves, instead of the majority.
See, I don't really care what. Again, this has been the ongoing thing. People saying that we're suggesting that you must use a certain definition. No, I don't care what definition. Let me finish. I don't care I don't care what definition somebody uses. I've said this a million times. All I've said is you can't use your definition to tell me what my theological position is.
Yeah,
that's my argument. But
they can. Like,
Soccer was making the argument that the definition of the usage of the majority of the population is the most useful one. But I don't necessarily agree, because the minority can use a word to describe themselves, and they would have a sort of the right to define the terms that they apply to themselves. That's what I'm saying.
You've hit a great point, right? Okay, so take for example the word feminist. I would say in the traditional sense, I'm feminist, but feminism, as you've seen coming out over the last 10 years or so, absolutely not. I think it's revolting. I'm deeply against it. So the minority has ruined that word. But context of what I'm being, who's asking me, how the question is formed, as to whether or not I would answer, am I a feminist? It's very important. If you've got polls where people are either ticking atheist or non-theist, it's completely down to their conception of the words, which is ironically what we're discussing here. You can't extrapolate from that what they mean or what they think those statements mean, and that's kind of the debate we're having here. I'm saying that atheism is synonymous with non-theism, whereas others are saying, you guys, or a lot of you seem to be saying that no, it's the positive assertion that there are no gods. So I'm just going to link here a few links that I found. Steve was fortunate before this conversation to link me several academic sources referencing atheism as he uses it, which is that it's the positive assertion that there is no God. Those there are not academic. They're all just, if you just type in atheism definition, they may be the top 6. I've been selective as well. The point being is that they're coming up more often because that is what people more often assume. Now, I don't want to resort to anecdotal evidence, but almost every atheist I've ever spoken to, I campaign, I do a lot of things. They use the definition that I'm using. It's synonymous with non-religious. Now, as for whether or not atheism is the correct term to use, I actually disagree. I think it's a bad term.
Can I quickly interject? You said that they use atheism to mean non-religious or non-theist?
No, not non-religious. They use the word atheist to mean I do not accept the assertion that there is a God. Okay. Sorry if I said otherwise. They don't mean non-religious. That's a different bit. When it comes to, I just want to make this very important. I don't think atheist is a good word. I really don't. I don't like calling myself that. I call myself non-religious. I think it's more accurate, and I want to be represented as non-religious. The problem is that the biggest segment of people that agree with me is atheist, when that doesn't. It's not accurate. It's like I am non-religious. So there you go. Planning on the table for you to.
So, Stephen, I just want to, in the internal chat for the video, because I can't do it inside of here. I put the thing from the Pew Research Center where they did the last survey in this. So in 2014.
Yeah. Also.
Hang on, MP. Hang on.
I'm sorry.
He's not finished yet. Let him speak.
So under the survey question,
can you not put it in the group chat, or I'm just curious.
I'm on my phone, sorry. Somebody can grab it from the external chat.
Oh, I understand.
And also, okay, your mic is a bit crackling in a moment.
Oh, sorry, how's that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's a bit better.
Okay, yeah, sorry, it's a headset. Yeah, so unaffiliated and religious in the U.S., 22.8% in 2014, which consists of 3.1% recognizing as atheist, 4% recognizing as agnostic, and 15.8% simply recognizing as nothing in particular. So,
sure.
Out of the 22.8% that were non-religious, only 3.1% recognized as atheist.
Sure. So somebody just linked the Nicola. Thank you very much. So I think I'm looking at it. Was you saying unaffiliated is 22.8%, and of those, only 3.1% describe themselves as atheist, 4% as agnostic, and nothing in particular? So when it comes to that study, I would put nothing in particular, or I prefer if it just said non-religious, to be honest. What I have is that all you're getting from that pool is what people describe themselves as. You're not getting anything to do with how they perceive the definition.
And that was my one point I made previously, a few moments ago. You remember about if you ask someone the question, are you non-religious? A question might answer, no, I'm not religious.
Okay, so allow me to clarify myself. Perhaps I'm failing to be as articulate as I am when I'm...
So sorry for the interruption, go ahead.
No, not at all. If you ask someone, what do you affiliate with, that's a different question to asking someone, how do you define atheism? If you ask most atheists, and all I have is anecdotal at the moment, I will, after this conversation, try and find objective evidence. If you ask atheists, especially all of the main faces, Dillahunty, Dawkins, Harris, Hitchens, if you ask them, what does atheist mean? What does the word atheism mean? They use the definition that I use. They use a synonymous definition with non-theism. They don't ever really, I don't think I've heard any say that it's the positive assertion that there is no God. The same is true when I speak to people when I'm campaigning, or when I'm having this conversation with lots of people. The only people that seem to define atheism as the positive assertion that there is no God is the religious and some agnostics. And
well, let me address that part. Okay, so first of all, I do think for demographic purposes, I think non-religious would give people much more political power. I agree with you on that one, wholeheartedly.
So just to nail that down, I'm with you there. But I think
that one I do agree
with.
Yeah, it's much better than atheism. The other thing is when now I lost my train of thought. I was trying to keep track of the live chat too. There's like multi things going on. Refresh my thing on your second point, because I do agree with you on the first, but what's the second? Oh, the going around and asking people. The people that you've asked, right? These are activists. These are actual atheist activists. If you go around asking people in academia what the definition is, they're going to give you a different story.
No, so yeah, this is why I disagree with you. This is the thing. If you want an honest conversation, if you want to really have a discussion, you need to. The people that you're talking to, the people that call themselves these words, are the one you need to use their definitions and have that conversation with them, not what the academia says. I've got an example. If you look at academic resources on the word determinism, it more often than not actually uses the definition of Newtonian determinism, which is the assertion that absolutely everything is basically clockwork. The thing is, if you ask determinists, what is your position on determinism? Most of them will say, they just say humans are determined by prior causes. They say nothing about absolutely everything. This is the problem. You've got academic language, which has its place, is very useful. Then you have the colloquial language, which is, if you want to have conversation with people and you want to make impact, this is where the popular stuff happens. You see it with theory as well. We use the word theory as a scientist would use the word hypothesis. If you're referring to academic papers, the word theory means something very different to what it means when normal people say theory. This is true of England, and I know it's also true of America. So, say appealing to the academic sources. If I was to say, yeah, that's a great thing to do, and that's the definition of atheism, I wouldn't ever describe myself as an atheist, but I don't, because I don't think that's where the definition is. The definition lies in what people describe themselves as and how they answer the question. The problem is that we don't have objective evidence.
The problem with that, though, is that that's great. I'm really glad that you agree with this, because then you'd have no problem at all not labeling agnostics and atheism, because you express them the right to define themselves in whichever way they want. But yet, that's not what you guys want to do. You guys are saying that, hey, you're saying that the majority of people should be able to decide how we use this word, because it's up to the people to decide how they use this word. Well, they ignore
I don't think he ever said that.
Well, I don't know if he is or isn't, but
that's not what he said.
Okay, well, can I make two quick points real quick? Is Saka still speaking? Because it's real hard to hear.
Yeah, his mic is whack.
Your mic is again.
Saka, you might want to refresh. There's two things Saka said. One thing about the Pew Research study. Number one, they also did another study that showed that when the word atheist, if someone, it has this huge connotation to it. Like they're less trusted than let's say, for instance, mass murderers or something like that. It was like some real craziness. So if you ask somebody if they're an atheist, they're less likely to say they are, but if you ask them, do they believe in God, and they say no, they would still not identify themselves as an atheist because the word has a connotation. So even with the Pew Research study, it showed that people would rather identify as non-religious than as atheists. The second point I want to make too. The second point I want to make. Hold on. Hold on, Saka. Let you speak. Let me finish. The second point I want to make is to this part about agnostics being this safe haven for people who say I don't believe in God, which I don't think it is. Because let's say if I was to take the position that atheism is the positive assertion that gods don't exist, and theism is the positive assertion that gods do exist. Those are the only two belief claims. Then everyone else is a lacktheist. Everyone else. That means if you're agnostic, you're a lacktheist because you don't believe in the assertion that God exists, and you don't believe in the assertion that God does not exist. If you are not cognizant, any other position other than theist or atheist, you are a lacktheist. So you guys have not presented an alternative. You just have regrouped everyone into a lacktheism instead of understanding this. The pull between atheism and theism. You detach the two.
Yeah, MP, you're completely off on that one. Lacktheism. Mazaka, you've got to refresh. Nobody can hear you. Your mic is garbled.
I have actually a question about the Pew poll. If someone took this poll, could they also pick both non-religious and atheist at the same time? Like, for example, I'm non-religious and I'm also atheist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we got too many things going on right now. Can we get back on track?
Sorry.
MP says something that's incorrect. Lacktheist is a pejorative. Not everybody is a lacktheist. An lacktheist was actually a coined phrase meaning somebody who believes God does not exist, but will resort to a lack of belief position in order to avoid a burden of justification. That's what a lacktheist
like bionic dance.
Like bionic dance.
Yeah, and not just that, but when
that doesn't apply to a lot of people.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, you sound much better.
Okay, when Ozymandias coined the term lacktheist, okay, he was using that word synonymously with non-theist.
Yeah.
Okay, so when MP says it's like, oh, you're just putting all these people into the category of lacktheist. Yes, they are. They are all non-theists. That's exactly it. Congratulations.
Well, that part's true too, but he did mean it pejoratively.
That's not what Steve just said.
Well, he
Steve
did mean
something totally different.
No.
Steve just said something
both of these are
That's
true.
not what Steve just said.
Both of them are true.
Allow me to clarify. I agree with you. Non-theist is the correct word to use. It's fine. But so is atheist, because it is synonymous with it. It means, to most atheists, it means exactly the same thing.
Except I've already presented you. I'm sorry, Stephen. I've already presented the polls that show that to most people, no, it doesn't.
He said to most atheists.
You didn't hear what I said. You must have refreshed.
And by the way, Ozzy is listening right now, and so is PZ. PZ, who's an academic, but PZ is a academic in biology, not philosophy.
Well, not you're appealing to him. But listen, one thing.
I'm not appealing to anybody. I'm just saying they're listening.
The big objection that you guys usually pull is that saying that you're an atheist, meaning lack of belief, doesn't tell people what you do believe. It tells you're telling people what you don't believe. But then you guys then, like Steve will say, I'm agnostic. Then I'll say, what does agnostic mean? I don't believe God exists and I don't believe God doesn't exist. Well, he's just done the same thing. He hasn't told me what he believes. His position
I have an argument.
Definitively what he does not. But hold on. Let me finish. His argument is exactly what he doesn't believe. So as atheist, the only two positions that are telling you what they believe under your paradigm is a theist and an atheist. Everybody else is telling you what they don't believe. So I don't know if you guys are refuting your own positions or if you guys are just confused.
Nicola,
but if you are an agnostic, tell me what you believe.
All right, Nicola.
That's a complete bastardization of the entire argument. I'm not even sure what you're even.
I don't know what MP is saying either. To be honest with you, it's not even relevant to what we're talking about. The agnosticism being not answering the question. Actually, I've addressed. I actually wrote something about this. The doctor here, Nicola, has actually read it. He actually thought it was pretty good about agnosticism still answering some type of question. And I used a very, I think, a persuasive argument to do that. Maybe MP hasn't read it yet, but it has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. Absolutely nothing.
No, you guys know. Hold on. When you first started speaking, your quote was, you said the reason why we don't define it as lack of belief because it doesn't tell you what a person believes, and then you use a chicken example. But then you said you're agnostic, and your agnosticism says you don't believe in theism and you don't believe atheism. So
we're not talking about agnosticism. We're talking about atheism. I can defend agnosticism.
Let me finish. I know, but let me finish. Your objection to atheism works against all other positions too.
No, it
I don't
doesn't.
think you understand it. You can't say that in somehow saying what you don't believe refutes your position and then say I don't believe you. You know, it makes no sense. Doesn't logically follow.
That is nobody's position here at all. Okay?
Yeah, I don't think it does either. But anyways, kick it back to Stephen, because I've heard MP's position for like forever now. I don't understand MP's complaints. I think that he makes some valid points, but then he goes off on a tangent. I do agree with Alex Malpass to a point where agnosticism doesn't fully answer the question. I've agreed with that since day one. I've never said, except for the very beginning, maybe in my very first video, I kind of put forth maybe otherwise, but I've changed a little bit on that. I understand how agnosticism doesn't answer the question. How I have made an argument since then, how it does give you more information. That does answer the question,
so,
right? Go ahead.
This will be an interesting way for me to get my head around your position a bit more. I think I understand it anyway, but how do you define agnosticism and Gnosticism?
Okay, agnostics, there's different ways of doing agnosticism. Thomas Huxley's agnosticism was basically, his position was that we can never know the existence of God or not. It's unknown to humans. We couldn't know one or another. That's a Huxley agnostic. I am not.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm a temporal agnostic, meaning that I don't believe anybody now has knowledge of God's existence one way or another.
When you say God, you mean all gods, don't you?
Any God, pick one. It doesn't matter. Yeah, pick a God. I mean, we can go on the whole, what do you mean by God, the whole ichtheist, non-cognitivist type approach. But let's, for arguendo, say... What's that, Steve? Steven?
Sorry, what term do you describe yourself as? Do you describe yourself as a non-theist?
I'm mostly an apatheistic, theological, non-cognitivist, temporal agnostic, basically. I don't really give a shit whether God exists or not. I don't care.
You're going to have a great time with that.
I don't care whether God exists online. In other words, I'm not going to have a debate or discussion with somebody. Does God exist? Does God not exist? I don't give a fuck one way or another, to be honest with you. I just don't care. I don't really care. Not when I'm online.
I care.
Yeah, I don't.
If God existed, I damn well want to know. That's why
I don't care. How about this?
There's no evidence for it.
Well, I say online because you're right. I do care. I want to know. But online, these discussions have been going on for thousands of years. They don't go anywhere, right? So I don't want to hear the arguments whether God exists or not. I want to hear the arguments why you're a theist or why you're an atheist. That's what I find to be more compelling.
Is a different way of asking the same question.
They're not, though. They're not. Because we're never going to get to the heart of God's existence or not. That ontologically is true or not true. God exists or God does not exist. I think we all agree upon that, right?
The problem is like maybe you're not doing it on purpose. It's because I don't know you too well. You're saying God exists or God doesn't exist, implying that there's one God and that we're talking about one God.
God or gods.
Yeah. Okay. When Steve uses God, he means any God.
I use the plural. I use it to mean plural as well.
Yeah, God or gods. One God exists.
The proposition I use is
one God does not exist.
You mean gods exist or gods does not exist? Okay, fair enough.
Okay, because I use Alex's. He says some God exists, so at least one or more God exist. That's the proposition, right? I believe if you accept that, you're a theist. Right, if you think that's true, you're a theist, right?
Sorry, say again?
If you think that proposition is true, you're a theist, right?
If you believe in a god or gods, you are a theist.
Right.
Anything else, including I don't know, I would say that you're both non-theist and atheist because the words are synonymous.
Yeah,
that's
where we disagree.
And that's where the disagreement lies. Yes.
Right.
Is not a word that you would use because it means a different definition to you. So it just all falls back down. I don't know how many times we can go in circles because identified the problem. This is my case. I'm saying that atheism is synonymous with non-theism because most activists and most people I speak to and most sources that I've seen, if you ask an atheist, if you ask people that use this label, what does it mean? They say it means that they just lack a belief in a god. They're just not convinced in it, in some god, if you want.
Maybe we can approach it from this way.
If you ask the opposition, be that Christianity, Islam, or indeed people that describe themselves as agnostic, they tend to define atheism as what they don't define themselves to be. It seems quite disingenuous. When I debate a Christian, I will not say, oh, you know, Christianity is the belief that there is a corporeal, bearded man within the sky. I will say, what do you believe? And when you speak to Christians these days, they tend to believe in a transcendent, just basically a God that isn't in the clouds. So that's what I'm dealing with. It seems to me the best way that we could come to an answer here is when this conversation ends, I can go away and look for objective evidence, because at the moment you only have my appeal to the authorities, which is a fair argument in this context, and my appeal to the people that I've spoken with, which is poor evidence, I understand. I would insist that the Paul study tells us nothing in this question. It just tells us what people have said. I just want to make sure that you guys understand that Paul that's been linked is a wonderful Paul. It's very interesting. It does tell you nothing about what people think about these words. Would you
actually it does, Stephen, actually, and let me explain why. Okay?
Yeah,
it is because if the term atheist and non-theist were truly synonymous, that people accepted this way, why MP proved my point for me? He said, because if you take a look at these studies and you see that people that recognize themselves as atheists compared to people that recognize themselves as simply not religious or agnostic, is that there's more of a negative connotation to using the term atheist. Okay, and that's not just coming from people that are non-religious. Those are people coming from religious people as well. Religious people, contrary to what you've said before, have a lower opinion of people that recognize themselves as atheist compared to the people that recognize themselves as non-theist or agnostic, which completely goes against the point that you guys are trying to make. If the majority of people truly recognize these words as synonymous, the same negative connotations that would be associated with atheism would be associated with agnosticism and non-theism. But because it's not.
Sokka, I think you're misrepresenting.
I think he's just kind of jumped off the roof right here. What the poll is saying. Let's say one thing. Hold on. Sokka. Let's say all those people. Hold on. One thing I want to just say is, if all those people who are non-religious, they could be theists. They could just be non-religious. They could be theists.
Okay, yeah. I'm not done. Okay. The idea within this is that within the study there is a negative connotation to the words atheism, which means that studies themselves, again, the majority of the population do not recognize these terms as synonymous with each other.
Okay.
Hold on. Non-religious is not non-theist.
MP. I think you are misrepresenting Stephen.
If I can address the point that you raised, and it's very fair. I understand what you're saying there. Oh, 1 second. Sorry, I've clicked the wrong link. When we look at the, all we can get is the implication that all we know from this study is that people are not identifying wherever this study was taken as atheists, because wherever the study was taken, to who it was taken on, they may have, for whatever reason, they didn't choose to vote atheist. But as I said at the early stages of this video, and as I've said throughout, I'm arguing that atheism means the same thing as non-theism. However, I've said at least twice that on a poll, I would say that I am non-religious. And in this case, I would vote that I am nothing in particular. So I would not say that this Pew study is offering the objective evidence that you seem to be extrapolating. I don't think it does.
One problem that I think Sokka is doing is non-religious doesn't mean that these people are atheists. He's kind of lumped them all into saying non-theist is like some synonym for non-religious, and that doesn't seem to be the case. Those people who are atheists, and I'm just saying, if we're just reading the poll objectively, we can say that the people who are atheists identify as atheists, and people who are non-religious are theists, but who lack a religious belief.
Actually,
I just want to bring up just to that point right there is those questions, the objection that the MP brought up. The people that maybe are religious but don't recognize with a particular religion are actually covered within the poll as well. They have their own category, and it's not included in the unaffiliated.
Saka, can you put the link?
It depends on how they define the term. Another thing is, in Britain, I don't know the poll off by heart, but I'll try and find it afterwards. Lots of people have said that they are non-religious. It turns out that they're spiritualist, because I don't know if it's the case where you live, but if you talk to someone that's spiritualist, they hate religion. Yet that is what they are. They're a religion. Because they believe in, well, there's reasons why I would define them as a religion. On the poll, that they are non-religious. They wouldn't put atheist because they have that same kind of stigma of, it's anti-theism. The problem is, to people that care about atheism, this is probably the central point I'm trying to make. To people that care about atheism, and to most people, I should caveat, they use a different definition of atheism, non-theism, to what the general public does. So both by saying, if you talk to Christians, you talk to most religious people, and you say, what is atheism? They say it's bizarre things. Most of them conflate it with evolution. It's, atheism is the belief that we evolved from muck. What the hell? Where did that come from? But that's very
Stephen. I just want to point out that if you go back to the Pew poll there, it actually lists the criteria for the questions underneath of the study itself, which says that under the category for other world religions, under the category for other faiths, it's included Unitarians, New Age religions, Native American religions, and a number of all other non-Christian faiths. That's in the category of other faiths, not in the category of unaffiliated. So again, all the people that recognize as spiritual are actually included in the category of non-Christian faiths, not as unaffiliated.
Can I?
No, hang on. Let me jump in here. I want to get some interaction here, because I haven't been able to get a word in edgewise. I haven't read the Pew thing, so I'm not even going to touch on it. But I'd really like to talk to Stephen more about why I have an objection to what we're talking about this. I think that's the crux of the conversation about why I'm having this objection. And I think Steve touches on a good point that, look, if you have a conversation with the general masses, you're going to try to talk about it the way they understand it. However, I think that you also kind of killed your argument by saying, look, in science, we know theory to mean a specific thing. We know it's a confirmed model. We know the word heat in physics means a specific thing rather than colloquial. We know a lot of words mean something in academics differently than they use in the general masses. However, I understand the need to want to talk to the general masses and get a conversation going. But when I have somebody who's from the general masses come into a hangout, when somebody like me, Nikolai, and Saka and Ozzy is in here or something, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, well, you guys are... you're all atheist. And we're like, well, no, some of us are, some of us are not. Well, no, you all lack a belief. You're all atheists. Well, no, we are going by the philosophical definition. And they're adamant about that as the only definition out there, because that's what Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra are putting forth, that is the true and only just definition. That is where my contention comes in. While that is a definition, it is not the only one, and you have to use the type of terminology being utilized in the situation. If I'm talking to people that are just lacking a belief and they call themselves atheist, I will call them atheist, right? I'm not going to argue with them and say, well, you're not a true atheist, you're not a philosophical atheist. No, that'd be stupid, right? But that's what I see happening.
I think
and Neslik, hang on.
If I can respond.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know how this works, by the way. I've noticed that I've spoken a lot more than most people.
No, you're supposed to. You're the guest. I want Neslik to shut up for a minute.
So we speak all the time. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I am actually begging for Stephen to talk.
Sorry. No, the point that you raised is very interesting. You made me realize that I didn't describe my analogy very well. When I was saying that you've got a scientific definition of the word theory, and then you've got a colloquial definition of the word theory that most people use. It's the most people use part that I was appealing to. Talking to people about the word theory, you want to use their language, like they're using it in that context. The same is true with atheism. Sure, most people may say that, that aren't atheists may have a negative connotation or just a different connotation of atheism to the people that are passionate, to most people that are passionate about atheism and describe themselves as an atheist. The point is that if you're speaking to those, like, that's, I just wanted to point out that my analogy probably wasn't very well articulated, but that's where the emphasis is.
So if we're talking to a bunch of creation, I mean, we're all on the same page on that, right? So when we're talking to younger creationists, right, we're not going to use their definition of evolution because it's shit, right? They don't know what a change of Lake frequency is. What's that?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, their definition of evolution, for example, is just so malformed and it's incorrect. If
not necessarily. They can say
evolution,
it's change. Let's say it's change. Change is the definition of evolution, but it's not the biological definition, right? If they say, well, evolution means if they say evolution means change, okay, fair enough. Colloquially, evolution means change. That's not the biological definition, right? The biological definition we use in the Great Debate community is a change of allelic frequency in a given population of species from one generation to the next. It's a working definition.
Or if you want to use the more colloquial version, I would say it's biological change over time. So that, you know, but I know where you're coming from. So different people define evolution to mean different things. And if you're trying to discuss, for example, if we had a Christian here and the Christian's trying to define evolution as, say, a human being born from a chimp, I will have that conversation with them. You know, if he wants to call it evolution, fine, but it's just that's not.
See, I disagree. I think we shouldn't let him have that because that's not what evolution is. You know, that would actually disprove evolution. Nestle would go through the roof. He would lose his mind.
Wrong.
You know?
That would disprove it.
Yeah, exactly. Nestle would have a heart attack if that was the topic.
Yeah,
but that's what they say they want to say.
Yeah, I know. No, I know. It's funny. There's a rule out there that somebody had posted something and I thought it was genius. But one of the things they posted with is that one of the things that when creationists do answer questions, if they decide to, almost always they're going to answer in a way that's actually going to be something that's either a contradiction or asking for something that would invalidate evolution. So it's almost every time to this, you know, well, show me evolution's true, but you know what? Show me two dogs having given birth to a turnip. Okay, that
would ruin the theory of natural selection.
Yeah, you know, that would be a bummer.
You know,
that would be strange.
It would be strange. It's like the crocoduck. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I'm KC. I'm friends with KC. King Crocoduck. By the way, King Crocoduck will be debating Ken Hovind. People have been asking. It is on August 11th. It's just been postponed, but August 11th, so that's not too far.
I just wanted to say, because I only got introduced to your videos recently in the Facebook group that we're in. I saw last night a debate between Ken and I forget his second name, Bill something.
Bill Ludlow.
No,
Bill Ludlow. And by the way, the group he's talking about is a super secret, highly classified Facebook group, but that's okay.
Sure. I don't believe that.
I just wanted to give him kudos. He absolutely destroyed Ken. I was
Didn't he nail it?
Impressed with how he
Didn't he nail it?
That was fantastic.
That was one of my favorite debates of all time. I mean, there have been good debates, don't get me wrong, but that was just amazing.
It was really good. I mean, there was parts where I was like, oh, I just want to help him, but most of it was just like flawless. When Kent started talking about bodybuilders such as Arnold Schwarzenegger and saying that, oh, well, their bones change. It's like, no, it's not true of Arnold because he took steroids, but he didn't take growth hormone and Sinful. If you look at the new age bodybuilders and they take growth hormone and Sinful, yeah, you probably will get bone changes. They probably end up looking like some mutated Neanderthal. So,
well, that's what some of the people think. They think that like all Neanderthals were basically like mutated chimps or something, or men with rickets or something. It's really strange.
That's actually a really good point. That because what person back then had the means of having a highly narrow diet to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger? Like no human at that time would be even doing that sort of thing. So
General might be debating Kent Hovind here too. We're going to find out Monday. Just FYI.
It's even crazier, by the way, because if you look at the fossilized feces of most hominids, 90% of their diet was vegetables. So and gladiators too. Like, you know, we have this idea of big, you know, buff gladiators. We look at their we have got some fossilized crap, and yeah, they were vegetarian. It's bizarre.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like sometimes I need to be a vegetarian.
What do they call fossilized poop? Like con something or other, chondrites or something?
Coprolites.
Coprolites, that's it. Yeah. Fossilized poop. Yeah.
Yummy.
But you know, I think that, you know, I think one of these days, you know, Steve, you and I will probably have to like go more one-on-one to kind of suss this out more, because I think we're kind of on the same wavelength, but just the fundamental disagreement we do know. I think atheism is not synonymous with non-theism, and you do. That's where the crux lies, right?
Sorry,
Go
what
ahead.
conversation is we very much know where we stand, and we know what we need to put the case to each other. We have to some degree, but
yeah, we have to suss it out another time.
Objective resources, etc., and better articulate our positions. Yeah, I do understand your position. I do want to make that very clear, and I also want to make clear that I don't describe myself as an atheist. I describe myself as non-religious. However, I do maintain that atheism is synonymous with non-theism. Talking to people which aren't atheists.
And I want to make it clear, I totally understand your position as well.
Can I make? I just want to make one clarification point, if I can, because some people are misunderstanding what I meant by the polls there. And the reason why I brought the polls up was to challenge the point that Stephen was putting out there, that this is the way that the word is commonly. And the polls, there's two polls that indicate that this is not true. One is that most people that recognize themselves as non-religious are not using it as synonym for atheist, or else you wouldn't have this huge distinction between people that are unaffiliated with religion or agnostic and atheist. So that's the first one where it kind of shows that, okay, when presented the option of how one will define itself, they're not using these terms as synonyms. But then the point was...
So, sorry, I only see your name when it comes up.
Sokka.
And then
Sorry, what?
Sorry, I don't know if you disconnected or whether or not my internet was bad, but I just wanted to ask you a quick question. So I've said to you that I assert outright that atheism, in the general sense, is synonymous with non-theist, and yet I've told you that I would still put down that I am a non-religious, for example. Extrapolate that these people have a negative connotation with atheism, because I am standing before you as an example of someone that doesn't have a negative connotation of atheism, and yet I still wouldn't put atheism. I would put non-theism. Sorry, I would put non-religious.
And that poll right there doesn't say anything with negative connotations. That one right there just shows how people choose to identify themselves.
Yeah. And that's all we know. Surely, that's all we can extrapolate from.
And that might be the case, but if these terms are truly synonymous, then you'd see, more people recognizing as atheist. Okay, that's the point right there. And you don't.
I don't think you can get that from that poll, though.
Yeah,
I don't think you can come to that conclusion from that poll.
The only thing that the poll shows is how people identify themselves, not how they use these labels.
Yeah, he's coming to like a general conclusion about something that doesn't.
Well, no, I'm using it as evidence towards my case. Okay, this is evidence towards my position. Okay, if I have to extrapolate that this means that people recognize this two different words, it's pretty likely that this is the case. You guys have to extrapolate that, it means exactly the same thing. It's just that people just chose that day to choose unaffiliated over, atheist, the way they describe themselves. They could have done it either way. So either way, we have to extrapolate from the data. But I think that the idea that these are two different positions and people recognize them as two different positions is clearly represented by the data that was collected within the Pew poll.
But the point I was making.
And then the next point, sorry, and that's fine. And if you answer the survey as non-religious instead of atheist, for whatever reason motivates you to answer that way that day, then that's great. You have your own anecdotal type of story that you can apply to this, and that's okay.
Sokka, you know what I think would help your account? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I cut somebody off.
But then,
go ahead, Stephen.
Go ahead, Stephen. We keep cutting you off. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. You go ahead.
MP's mic is getting pretty bad too, actually.
I want to say something. Sokka said that Stephen said that the majority of people use atheism, but I don't think he said it. He said that the most atheists use the term like this. That's the distinction.
Yeah, I don't think I particularly agree with that. I've known a lot of atheists as well, and the vast majority of atheists that I know that have been through any kind of philosophy courses or schooling, education, they all tend to go with the very narrow definition. I only find
you said, but you just added another criteria to it.
Can I finish? I find that the people that use the broad one are the people like the activist, right? The atheist activist, and the ones on YouTube and G+. Outside of YouTube and G+, in the real world, I don't know if that's necessarily the most common thing. I like to do a study on that. Some kind of just go man on the street and ask people and find a way to ask questions that are not loaded and see what the general thing is.
You would have to be
extremely right. MP, reset your mic. Your mic is going nuts.
I would like to see a poll about only picking atheists, or at least who identify themselves as atheists, and ask them how they use that label.
Yeah, and it wouldn't prove anything one way or another. It's just for my own edification of how generally people use it. It doesn't really change my argument at all, but I think Stephen would be interested in that. Maybe between the two of us we can come up with some non-loaded questions and try something like that, and not get arrested if we're walking up to people because you see me walking up to somebody, people get scared, right?
The next poll that was brought up was the poll about how do people feel about the term atheist. Okay, and let's say that it was the case that that people just choose not to use the word atheist because of the negative connotations that come with the term. Then even if that's the case, I still think that presents a pretty good argument that these terms are not synonymous. It's that these people recognize the difference between these different terms and would rather associate themselves with the less offensive term, because they also do recognize that these terms aren't synonymous.
The thing
one thing,
MP, let them hash it out a little bit.
Stephen.
Sorry, if you was to ask the general public, what do you think the connotation of atheism is, and you gave them 3 or 4 options, I concede you're going to get more akin to your definition of atheism, which is the active belief that there is no God. You might even get belief in Satan, because you just will. You ask people which define themselves as atheists. I'm pretty much convinced. I'm certainly convinced of Britain, and I'm convinced of
that's a good point.
All Americans that I've interacted with, that they would use a definition akin to how I'm using it.
I see what the problem is. I think you're right. In Britain, I agree and I disagree. I think in Britain you're right. I think in Britain they probably would more attend to your definition. But I've lived in America all my life, and I've been all over the United States. I can tell you that I personally believe that in America they generally would go by the atheism is the belief that God does not exist. That's in America. So maybe there's a cultural thing.
I don't know about that.
I'll see you guys.
I don't know about that either. Because, I mean, if you look at
I'll see you guys later. I gotta go.
Later, Hunter.
See you later. Take
care.
Like if you look at politics in the United States, I bet you there's a lot more people in politics in the United States that are actually atheists than would actually answer the question that they are atheists if you ask them directly, especially if they were in a public forum, like with a microphone in front of mass media, for example.
Yeah.
I mean,
Bernie Sanders is one. Bernie Sanders is one.
Bernie Sanders is definitely one of them.
Yeah, this is private. But the Pew Research, these are private surveys done in somebody's phone call there.
But I would accept Saka's conclusion if the poll had non-theist, atheist, and these type of things. Then I would say, okay, Saka has a point, because non-theist is a category and people are identifying as non-theist. But that doesn't seem like that's happening. Non-religious, I don't know if that. I don't know if the poll, if we can make the same conclusions that Saka's making from the poll that we have from the Pew Research.
It just doesn't seem to follow. People generally don't identify
non-religious and non-theist. Come on, man. Seriously?
People generally don't identify.
Non-religious doesn't mean non-theist, Saka.
They're not the same, no. But people generally don't affiliate with non-theism. They don't say, "Oh, I'm a non-theist." That doesn't really. There's so many subsets of non-theism that I don't think anybody's walked around and said, "You know what? I'm a non-theist." That doesn't tell you anything.
Well, exactly. What do they call?
Well, think about this. Think about this, Steve. If someone said, "I am non-religious," could they also be a theist?
If they're non-religious,
Steve. I have a question. You said that you
can be religious and not have a God.
No, I'm saying if someone says I am non-religious, could that person also say I am a theist?
Yeah. Yeah, because they could use the religion as
and that's
somebody.
what I'm saying. So,
yeah,
so on that poll, if someone says
I know
am a
people that are
non-religious,
Christian that are
doesn't mean they're an
non-religious
atheist.
that say they're not religious because they
Yeah,
don't.
but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So someone answering I am non-religious on that poll could possibly be a theist. They could be either theist or an atheist. It tells you nothing about the theism and atheism, and that's one thing I keep saying. Sokka's concluding that they have to be kind of a non-religious. That there's some that it makes some conclusion there.
No, see, I think the way that would be get around that would be easy on the poll. On the poll, all you have is you have a distinction there that says okay, theist, and then you have non-religious, saying that you are meaning that word non-religious to being not the same as somebody who's a theist. I mean, you could word. There's so many different way of doing these polls, right? But I do think non-religious is a better header than non-theism.
It doesn't say non-religious. It says nothing in particular.
The poll for me is a non sequitur. I'll be honest with you guys.
Which one is?
You just can't get the information that.
Under the category unaffiliated, it's not non-religious. It's nothing in particular. It's atheist,
you don't affiliate
agnostic,
with any
and
specific religion, but you can still be a theist and fall under that category.
That's actually covered in the other part of the poll. There's another part of the poll that asks the importance of religion on a day basis.
This is the problem. You're assuming that the people answering the poll have the same connotation of the words that you do.
I agree with that. Yes. I think you're right on that.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. That's why you would have to tailor a questionnaire, a study that's very finely tailored.
I'm not doing that. Okay, I'm not starting off with the assumption that they're using the same connotation of the words that I'm using. I'm using the data that they've collected, and I'm extrapolating from that more than likely they are associating these words as two different things. I'm not starting off with any type of presume that they're using my definition. I'm using this as evidence to support that they might be using the same definition as I use because of the way that they answer the questions. Okay, that's why I'm presenting this. I'm presenting this as evidence towards a case, not as saying that they are assuming my definition and therefore I'm right.
No, we're challenging that. We're challenging your conclusions, not your evidence. Your evidence is sound, but your conclusions are not following.
Your conclusion is that these people recognize the words in the same way, but chose for some reason just to pick unaffiliated that day or nothing in particular instead of saying atheist. Your conclusion is my conclusion that these people recognize the difference between these terms, and your definition is that these people don't recognize the difference in the term, but just 3% decided to say atheist, and the rest of them decided to say nothing in particular that day because for whatever reason.
Sokka, I think Stephen would agree that the most people would use atheism to mean the positive belief that there no gods exist, right? Or not, Stephen?
I personally think that most people believe.
Hold on, you guys might not be hearing Stephen. Stephen, you guys keep cutting him off. Go ahead, Stephen.
When Sokka, the last thing how Sokka concluded, saying that all you can get from it is that for some reason they didn't choose to use that term, they chose to use the other term. That's not what you said earlier on. You strongly implied, I think you may even have said, we'll be able to see when it goes back, that you can get that they have a negative connotation of the word atheist. And my objection was that you cannot conclude that because as one example, is someone that says there isn't a negative connotation with atheism, it's the same as non-theism, but I still would choose not to use that word. So...
Yeah, actually, that was presented by MP. MP brought that up originally say that...
So whoever presented it as evidence that people have a negative connotation of the word atheist, if it was you, if it wasn't you, sorry, I've confused the.
Oh, I said that by MP bringing that.
I reject. But if your conclusion where you just say some people just choose to describe themselves as non-religious or whatever it was, let me quickly find it, as nothing in particular rather than atheist, I don't disagree with you, and I fall into that category. I would choose that, but this is what I mean by it's a non sequitur. It doesn't tell us anything. You need a different pool. You need to find what. Are you an atheist? And you need to find people that are described as atheists. And then you just need to ask, really, how do you define atheism? And give them two options. One, and random it, like change it. You just say the active belief that there are no gods, or you don't hide it, like make it obvious what's being said there, like the belief, the assertion that there is no god or gods. And the other one is the rejection of the assertion that there is a god or gods. I would bet I would bet that you're going to get the latter is the answer from people that describe themselves as atheists.
Again, locality, where? In Britain or America?
Sorry, I have to quickly run. It won't be too long. I'm only going to be about 30 seconds. It will give you time to...
So you're already driving him away. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
You know what I would do? I would ask two questions. I would ask, the first set of questions would be, do you believe gods don't exist? Do you believe that there's no gods? I would ask those questions. Then the second question I would ask is, how do you identify atheists, non-religious, whatever? And then you can start seeing how people are putting their beliefs and what labels they're putting on their beliefs. Like X amount of people would say that they don't believe in a god, and that's atheism, or that's non-religious, or whatever.
And that is better because no, you can get more information.
I wouldn't mind doing something like that. I would want to do it with somebody. I believe these are two-man things, and people could video log this kind of stuff. I'd be happy to ask these people questions. I'm not afraid of asking questions, obviously, but I'm not going to do it on my own. Somebody else would have to live near me, and we could have to do some kind of collab. But I would be fascinated by just asking people specific questions and not loaded questions, right? And that's the hard part, coming up with non-loaded questions. I think that'd be a community thing of what questions would work and what we all think would be fair and unbiased. I don't think it'd really prove anything or demonstrate one way or another, but it's more just for curiosity what the average person thinks.
Because we really actually, to be honest with you,
making a blind study. It'd almost be worth it to make it blind, because if you have street epistemologists that go out and they're asking people what their beliefs are, and they bring up the fact of God, then you take that data and extrapolate from it instead of actually actively going and seeking the information, because people can get, like you said, people can take that as off-putting and biased and whatever, and they can actually answer differently based upon the situation they're in. I think a lot of that could come along, and then it just, a lot of different factors go into it. Whereas if it just comes up in the course of something that isn't necessarily related to what you're trying to study, then you have a better chance of getting accurate data.
One thing I do like about this is that we have narrowed it tremendously we're just really talking about whether atheism is synonymous with non-theism.
Well, I could have told you that. I could have told you that last year. That's where it was. That basically. No,
but I'm saying, but that base is the issue here.
Yeah, but by the way, Ozzy had to go, but I'm not sure if Steven knows Ozzy. Do you know who Ozzy is?
I don't.
Okay, Ozzy Ramsey's the second. He's the guy that actually helped Matt Dillahunty in his debate with Saitan Prunicate. He's the one that actually has explained to Art Raw why.
This goes out to all of you, by the way. When I'm debating, I can be quite assertive. I don't know if I have been this way. I don't mean to disrespect anyone, including Ozzy, if I did.
Oh, no. We like the... You see the way we talk? We're all friends here. We all love each other. This is how we actually get along on a Sunday. So
you have to understand that I'm British, and we apologise for apologising.
I thought that's Canadians.
That is, but you'd be impressed that... how much Britain does it. If you watch my debate with Alex, the amount of time we go, oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, both you guys, I know. It's like, oh, God damn, just hug and get over it. Just move on to something else. I know. No, we take the more aggressive approach, but we're all big boys in here, so we don't take it personally. I have the utmost respect for Nestlig and MP. I disagree with him on a few things, but I know Nestlig is masterful in his ability to do evolutionary biology. I know MP is a master litigator, masturbator, and a few other things. But no, Ozzy had said that he wouldn't mind. He had to go, but he wouldn't mind having a chat with you at some point on this, because he does not think atheism and theism or non-theism are synonymous by any means. And I happen to agree with Ozzy on it. And Ozzy is much more articulate because he has a PhD. Well, he didn't finish his PhD. He's an all but PhD.
Does Matt Dillahunty agree with Ozzy?
I think
he doesn't.
He doesn't, but they have said, I have heard that Matt Dillahunty is slowly coming around a lot more than I thought he would, because when you look at his gumball analogy, there's some problems with it logically, I think.
The last thing that the last video that Matt Dillahunty put out on this topic was that. Can you guys not hear me again?
We can hear yourself.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Saka.
Okay. Yeah, the last position that Matt Dillahunty held on this was that there's there's no reason to stipulate any definition of as more correct than the other one. Is that it comes down to personal usage, how people choose to use the word, and I'm of the same camp. See,
that's true. Me too.
This entire throughout the entire conversation that we've had here, I've never said that you're wrong in your definition or that you shouldn't do this. In fact, I appreciate and understand the importance of using a broad definition when it's putting people into a demographic for representation within government. I'm sorry, I'm just going to get away from my kid here because he's yelling. Yeah, so I understand that the importance of recognizing people into a larger group, a larger demographic when it comes to things like representation. Now, that being said, that doesn't make that definition that puts people into a larger group as the most efficient definition in defining what somebody's position actually is. So, what the better clarification would be is to understand that there is a colloquial use that we use the word, in which case atheist would be anybody who possesses a worldview that does not contain the existence of a god, which I'm more than happy to accept that is a very broad definition of atheist. But if you want to have this on the topic on a philosophical level, where say we're talking a person's an individual's belief regarding the question of does God exist, well, there is a little bit more of a narrow definition that's accepted then within philosophical circles. So you can almost call that philosophical atheism. Okay, so we can put the broad definition in there. If you want to create a subset, you have the standard definition of atheism, which includes all people whose worldviews don't contain the belief of a god. And then you have the philosophical definition of those that affirm the belief that no gods exist. And in which case, it's a distinction, but it's an important distinction when you come to this, what the topic of discussion actually is.
So you know what? When this was,
oh my God!
Go ahead, Nessim.
Oh, sorry.
I think Steve was trying to talk. You both cut him off.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Sorry, so I understand where you're coming from. In reference to Matt Dillahunty, before this video, I actually listened to his video again on agnosticism and Gnosticism. And while he said that, you shouldn't label people, while he said the points that you were raising, he also makes it very clear that if your purpose is to have a conversation, use the terms that they use. When you talk to atheists, we need to know what definition they use. It's all coming down to that. I would never engage with a Christian, like even with Ken, and say he believes that, and I define what he believes. It doesn't seem right, but I understand that it seems that way in the opposite to you guys, with people walking in and going, no, you are an atheist.
That's the problem, right? That's exactly what you said. That's the issue that I'm bringing to the table, because when they do that, they're automatically wrong, because we're not using their definition. We're using the definition we decided to use, which is the philosophical one.
Wouldn't this be the answer?
What?
People coming in and saying you are an atheist is inflammatory, and you saying I am not an atheist is also inflammatory, because the real question is, the real way to approach that is to go, how are you defining atheism? Then you can debate over what atheism is, etc., but just ask them if they define atheism. If you're talking to me and I go, you're an atheist, and then I say, you say to me, well, I don't identify as an atheist, can you tell me what the definition is? And I tell you the definition, and I say it's synonymous with non-theism. You can say, yeah, if according to your definition of atheism, according to the definition that you're using, yeah, I'm an atheist. To use that term because I think it's loaded, or whatever reasons you may give. It seems like it's such a non-issue, but it is. The reason why it's an issue, to get to the bigger scope of what Alex's point was throughout his entire video, is that we do need a label. Otherwise, we are not represented, and we're certainly inadequately represented. The question is what label works. In our current climate, the best label to use is atheism. It has traction. It has people actually campaigning, saying, hey, you don't get special rights because you're Christian and because you're Islam. You have to give us rights, and we've just defined ourselves as atheists. It doesn't matter if they don't use the word. It doesn't matter if they don't. It would be better, in my opinion, if they use the word non-religious, for example. I think that's the better term to use. However, the result is the same. They're trying to make it so that get special treatment because they choose to believe things without evidence. We do need to be publicly and politically recognized. And as it stands, atheism is by far a better word to associate with, and to try and go, hey, let's really move it into this definition, get that definition used throughout the entire conversation by everyone, like push for that definition, because has weight.
Yeah, I get that, but see, to what the ends are going to be in my mind's eye, the ends is secularism, and I know that you're a secularist, and I know that CosmicSkeptic's a secularist, and I think everybody in here actually, even the theists here are secularist. That to me is the goal. I don't care whether you believe in God or not. Like I said, this is where my atheism comes in, right? All I care is you keep the shit out of the schools. Right, you keep.
That's why I use the term non-religious.
Yeah, and that's why I said I agree with you on that, though. That's why I did say I agree with you.
Special exceptions, special rules being given to people that believe things without evidence. So the thing is, we all have the same goal. It seems it's what is the best way to get there, and I would think that name to go under, even though I don't personally like it. Really, I should put myself down as an atheist, even though I don't think it's the best term. I think non-religious is. I agree with Sam Harris on that point.
Well, I don't put myself as an atheist. That doesn't describe my theological perspective, right? I've worked out a very coherent framework of everything, from my foundationalism to my non-evidentialism. I'm trying to be the most specific person I can be, so I don't get miscategorized. I mean, people have taken things I've said, and we know there's a lot of hate videos out there. I mean, I got 2 today, right? I mean, people love to put videos out, and I get that. I want to be as specific as possible. Like, for example, G-Man goes on the Drunken Peasants, and he says, hey, Steve has said that you can be atheist. Steve has said you can believe in a God and still be an atheist. Now, does that make sense to you, Stephen? For anybody in the right mind, how could you believe in God and be an atheist, right? And everybody knows me and said, no, Steve didn't say that. That's not possible. And I didn't say that because that's ridiculous. But they're going to take something and run with it because they weren't understanding what I was saying. And so I have to be very, very specific in what my beliefs are. And so I identify as an agnostic for a very specific reason, and that means I don't believe the theists are right. I don't believe the atheists are right. I don't want to be categorized as either one. It's no different, and let me lay this out real quick. It's no different than a theist coming in and say, hey, well, you actually know God exists, Steve, because Romans. Well, what's the difference between that and somebody coming in and saying, well, Steve, you're actually an atheist because of some broad definition? That's the same thing to me.
No, one of them is saying that you believe something that you don't, which is God exists because of Romans, whereas the other is saying you're an atheist, but really it's saying according to this definition you're an atheist.
I don't think that's how they use it. They're actually.
I know the delivery seems the same, but it's not. That's not the same thing. I wouldn't agree with your example there, but I do agree that the delivery looks just as aggressive.
Yeah, no, and I understand that there's a slight nuanced difference there, right? But it's still, I am not subscribing myself to that particular definition. So to me, anybody who lacks a belief is not necessarily an atheist.
Sorry, can I pull an analogy? For example, you would not say you are a fish in the colloquial sense, but you are a fish in the cladistic sense, right, Steve?
Yes. Monophyletically, monophyletically, I'm a fish.
Sorry, making that a point. So I'm not a fish in the colloquial sense, right? But I am a fish in the
cladistic.
Monophyletically, I'm a fish cladistically. Yes.
Yeah.
How so? Can you explain?
It's a topic called cladistics. In cladistic classification, we classify things by our ancestry. For example, snakes are.
No. When you say that you're descended from a fish-like ancestor, because we fall into mammals.
Yes, but mammals descended from the clade of fish.
Yeah, Sarcophagi is a clade that will.
I want to bring up the example. For example, snakes evolved from four-legged animals called tetrapods, but snakes are still tetrapods today.
Yes, but see what happens, Steve. What happens is all the tetrapods were taken out of the Sarcophagi clade per se. What they do is they take something and say, look, we're no longer going to call this fish anymore because we've changed so much. We're going to mean fish to mean like the lobe fish that actually swim in the ocean, right? So monophyletically, meaning all descendants from any kind of fish-like creatures. That is true. We evolved from the lower type of species like this fish. However, they have taken.
That we're a fish. I don't.
Well, we are a fish monophyletically. That's a fact.
Is that we are a chordata or chordata because
we're that too.
We are descended from that part. I accept that.
Yeah.
But fish evolve. I don't. Maybe I'm just not following the analogy.
It's a bit weird because laymen expect to, of laymen think that a fish means something like an aquatic, gill-bearing vertebrate with scales. However, not everything that is a fish has all these traits. For example, there are fish that live on land most of the time, and there are fish that don't have scales, and there are fish that are warm-blooded, and there are some things. And there are some things that have gills, but are tetrapods.
Sorry, just to make myself clear, like if you have a definition that humans fall under, the definition of fish that humans fall under, yeah, fine. I'm just saying, how are you defining fish? You define it. Okay.
Well, there's a similarity here because look at paraphyletically we are not fish, but monophyletically we are. So if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, Steve, you're a fish," I don't know if they mean monophyletically or paraphyletically, right? I can say, yeah, I'm a fish monophyletically, but I'm not a fish paraphyletically. They may not know the difference, right? But they're saying something that may or not be true depending on your definition. When they're coming in and saying I'm an atheist, it depends again on what you mean by that. It's a great analogy.
Yes. Can you please tell me the definition of fish that I fall under?
Cladistically, fish is synonymous with craniate. That means that you have a skull. A brain inside a skull.
So can you give me a link to a resource?
I have. Let me pull up on something. Let's see here.
Because one, I'm genuinely curious. I did not know that I fit under any definition of fish. But if that is the definition of fish, fine. Yeah, I fit under that. But, so there's no problem with that. I'm basically practicing what I'm telling you should practice, which is okay, so you're calling me an atheist. How are you defining atheist? And they define it as non-theism. And then you go, yeah, okay, well, I fit that definition. But I want to present a scenario to you all, which would be very interesting. Do you want me to quickly read what's on the screen before presenting this?
Yes, go ahead. Because I think this is a really good argument. This is like somebody coming and saying I'm atheist. Well, I may mean... I think fish monophyletically because I believe in cladistics. You're supposed to take everything monophyletically, okay? But I understand that how paraphyletic and polyphyletic it works. So I understand when people say, you're not a fish. Fish swim in the ocean. Yeah, you're right. We're not paraphyletically a clade on that because they've taken tetrapods out of that. But we're still Sarcoptegia. We're still in that clade of fish from a direct descendants. And so again, well, Steve, you're not a fish. Like G-Man will be like, Steve, you're not a fish. Well, to me, I am a fish because in the monophyletic clade, we are. But that's just my personal choice by calling it that. If you talk to other people, they'll be like, oh, well, we migrated so much, we don't call ourselves fish anymore. Biologists can go either way on that, There's no one right answer. The only right answer is monophyletically, we are fish. Paraphyletically, we are not. That's a fact. But which one you decide to go by meaning of the word fish, I don't care.
Okay, so I currently can't get my head around this idea that somehow we fit the cladal definition of fish. But I'm just going to assume that I've got it because it's not relevant.
It's required reading for the GDC. It's called Neil Shubin's Your Inner Fish.
Sorry, say again.
It's required. We have required reading in the GDC. One of the books that's required reading is nobody ever read, but it's called Your Inner Fish by Neil Shubin. Great book there.
Especially if you give me links after this, I will look this up. I'm very interesting. I did not know that I could, under some definition, call myself a fish unless I've made that definition up on the spot. I would read what's on screen.
We're not messing with you here. This is real shit.
But the point is that if you're having a discussion with people which are, it depends on who you're having a discussion with. And the problem is no one defines themselves as a fish. This is
because it's not useful nowadays. Yeah.
Well, it's never been useful really like that. No one's ever described themselves as a fish, really, especially when it comes to a political thing. If you would allow me to segue, guys, I want to present a scenario to you which would help me understand your position more, because this is where I think there's a problem. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, by all means.
So, if there's a scenario where people are voting for either somebody that describes themselves as an atheist and they're looking for secular rights, etc., somebody that describes themselves as a Christian and wants to, let's just say they're fundamentalist Christian. They want to ban homosexual practices. You get the idea. And then you've got someone else that fits, that describes himself as an agnostic. And you can see by the polls that for whatever reason, these two are in the race and this person isn't. Now, the fact that you if you're having a conversation with someone personally, you say, hey, I identify with this. And it's so much that I refuse to call myself an atheist and I won't vote for him. You get a situation where you get some votes, and this situation wins. And it means that you're underrepresented because you refuse to use their term for arguably legitimate reasons. We're in a situation here where, like it or not, atheism is the term that has weight. And agnosticism doesn't. And many other terms, I can't even remember the term that you used, Steve. Fair play to you. It implies that you've really thought things through, but it's no one, you're like in a very small minority there. And if you refuse to identify with atheism and you refuse to vote for atheism, like, it depends on your situation on all these things. The point I'm trying to make across is that there's real consequences of not just going, oh man, I don't really like the word atheist. I don't like the word atheist, but I would vote for somebody that describes themselves as an atheist, etc. Because it's just, it doesn't matter if, you know, I describe myself as non-religious. I'm basically curious, like, in that situation, are you so stubborn that you'd go, oh God, no, I'm not an atheist, I'm voting for the guy that I really believe in? Or
well, I
really
don't vote by, I don't vote for people by their labels. By the way, he just posted something from Ferengula, which is PZ Myers. Yes, you are a fish. PZ was listening earlier, but I guess he took off. PZ's like, oh, fuck this stuff, talking about atheism again.
He would come in and scream, yes, you are a fish. Deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. You guys deal with it. So, but I'm not going to vote for somebody because of their beliefs or lack of beliefs or whatever. I'm going to go by their positions, but I am more likely to vote for somebody that's a secularist, right? That's my thing. I want to keep separation of church and state. I want to keep creationism out of school. If it's the atheist agenda that'll do that, great, absolutely, go for it. I'll support them. I'm on the Atheist Agnostic, the Atheism United webpage, right? My channel's listed under Atheism United. Okay. So I understand the need for that.
You also recognize, I assume, that atheism is, like it or not, just the term that carries more accurately, maybe not more accurately, but with much more oomph than the term that you think is particularly right.
Politically,
it's true for
politically.
Exactly. But the same is true for me when it comes to, like, for example, the idea of free will. I don't believe we have it, but I don't know if I should call myself a determinist, because determinism means that absolutely everything is determined. I don't believe that. I just believe that humans are determined. So, but I would still affiliate with determinism because that's just, unfortunately, the situation. You find this in all things. You know, it's just like words, unfortunately, don't quite carry the meaning that they're meant to. And that's the nature of words. They're always going to change because they are at the mercy and at the whim of the people that use them.
But that's why when you have a conversation with somebody, you ask them not so much I don't care what the words mean or what they want to define it, but what a person's beliefs are or lack of beliefs, whatever. Just have a conversation with a person. If I tell somebody, look, I have a well thought out position. I'm not an atheist, but I am an agnostic, a temporal agnostic. Most people would be like, okay, let's go with that, right? Let's talk about that. But you do have these militant atheists that have been programmed by people like Matt Dillahunty, who I have the utmost respect for. He owes me $20. If you ever get a hold of him, he owes me $20. Actually, he's supposed to come on one of these days, hopefully. But
doesn't that depend on how you define $20?
American. But when they come, they come to me, or I'm like talking to somebody on a video or something, and they're like, "Well, Steve, you're just an atheist. You're denying it." That bugs me, right? Because that's misrepresenting my position. I do understand from political reasoning, though. Yes, I agreed with Alex on that part.
Even though I use the definition of atheism to be the same as Stephen, I won't call Steve an atheist because I respect his decision not to label himself as an atheist.
Well, but hang on, Stephen. You do or don't take the label of atheist? You said you don't, right?
Yeah, it depends on the context. If you're asking me just personally, like, outside of any kind of decisions, etc., you just say, what are you? I think the most accurate term for me is non-religious, and I would like for non-religious to be in the place that atheism is in at the moment, where it holds weight and it can actually do something. It can actually stop the religious from having special rights, etc., having tax exemption. But reality doesn't align with what I hope for, and that's just the case. And so you have to work with reality rather than, I mean, it's just far more applicable. It's just the situation is just the case that.
But I'm not going to call you an atheist if you don't define
myself as an atheist. It's fine, especially because I'm still convinced that if you ask people who are atheists, what do you define atheism? I'm still pretty certain that they're going to go with the synonymous to non-theism. Whereas if you ask me just personally, what do you identify as? I would probably say non-religious. I just think it's more accurate.
No, and I get
like
that.
I said, you can be an atheist and be a Buddhist.
But I'm not going to call you an atheist if you don't identify with an atheist, right? If you don't identify with atheism, why would I call you an atheist?
I'm fine with it. It depends on your definition of atheism. This is it. It's like people seem to have the idea that it's their definition that matters. It's not. If most people use a definition of atheism that I fall under, which I think I do, fine, call me that. It's fine. I mean, and then when you say to me, do you define yourself as that? My answer isn't no, because I don't personally. My answer is it just depends on the context. So in the context of general life, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You can call me that. Whereas if you ask me just personally, do you really think, would you really define yourself as an atheist? I'd say no, I'm non-religious.
Okay.
It's just,
I understand that.
For it.
I think again,
is that you won't. You say to me, you go, God, don't call me that. That's really aggressive. I'm not going around telling you what you should be called.
But that's what I got away from.
Yeah, I need to make this very clear. I understand that position, but I don't think it's particularly helpful to the cause, that the result that we all want.
Yeah,
we want to be better represented. If that's our goal, then surely getting tied up over words, even though semantically, it's not the best thing to do. Really, if the result is this, then this is just a battle not worth fighting. The war is here. But
the takeaway from Alex's video was, he actually even said to me, "Well, I did not say that all agnostics are atheists." He even tweeted that to me, and I'm like, "But you did." In his video, even the beginning, even the thumbnail is basically saying you're an atheist. At the very end, it's like, "Oh, great, you're agnostic, you're an atheist." I don't think that's true, because you cannot apply that to everybody. Under a certain definition, sure, but if a person rejects that definition, you cannot say you're an atheist. You can't say that I'm an atheist, because I'm not an atheist, right? I reject that definition, and what he wants to do is he wants to call anybody who he wants to call anybody who's agnostic.
But then, Steve, if I reject your definition, then what do you say to that? Like, I reject your definition,
fine.
you reject my definition.
You can
then
reject.
Where do we stand?
There's nothing wrong with that.
Where do you put the right to disregard a definition?
There's two definitions out there.
I think Stephen outlined this, right. It's like it depends. Like whether you fall under a label is completely contingent on what label you're looking at, right? Like
and it's not up to you.
Yeah, it's not up. Like so again, like under one definition, you might be Steve. It might be actually valid for you to call yourself an atheist, but under a definition you don't believe is that you may believe is better, then no. But you can't. An objection to this can't be, and I agree with you. But a good objection is, well, I don't accept that definition, so therefore I'm not an atheist.
Exactly.
It's silly. You can do that with anyone.
Yeah.
Let's go to.
I don't accept that definition.
If you all agree that it's a matter of usage and not,
I don't.
If you can all agree. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, since they're addressing me, can I answer? I don't accept that definition for personal use. Okay. That's not how. That's not. Well, yeah, no, yeah. I've already said that. I get the reasoning for that.
So why have you got a problem with Alex saying that you're an atheist?
Because again, if I'm having a conversation with him and say Steve, yeah, well, you know what, you're an atheist, and I'm telling him straight up, I'm not an atheist because I don't accept that moniker for the specific reasons why I think that the better way to define atheism is the more philosophical approach, right? The belief that God does not exist. That's how I take it to be. If you don't want to, I get that, fine, understand. But you can't tell me my theological position, just like I cannot tell anybody else their theological position. That's what the problem is.
It seems like you got more of a problem with just the word than the definition. If someone said you don't believe in X, you would agree with that. But if someone says you're an atheist, then you would say, no, I don't call me that.
No, I don't care about the label. The label doesn't bother me. If I felt I was an atheist, I'd be calling myself an atheist. I'm not averse to controversy. This is the great debate community, okay?
Steve, under my definition of atheism, are you an atheist?
Under your definition of if you lack a belief, I would be an atheist under that definition, yes.
Yeah, so if
that's never been an argument.
It's a matter of usage.
Step 2, if we was able to conclude that most atheists, the atheist movement, we find out that they do actually, that is the definition they use, would you be more comfortable with saying,
no, because I think that's a bad way to go about it. I think the better definition of use is the philosophical one. I think that the atheist movement should adopt the positive one. I think they should be positive atheists. I think there's a better approach. If they want to get more representation from more people, I think that is a better way of doing it. So I think that I think Silverman is wrong.
I came in on this a little bit late. Could you explain the more positive approach?
A positive atheism is the belief that God does not exist.
No, I mean, what's the more positive approach, or what's the more appropriate approach in your opinion?
Positive atheism. Ask you for the reasoning for it.
Because positive atheism. Because positive atheism is a very specific position that you are saying this is my belief. Under philosophical atheism.
Unless I'm mistaken, it seems that whoever asked that question, and do correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't asking that. I think they were asking, why do you think it's a better idea to not just go, yeah, atheism as a word is in a position.
When you're engaging with
when you're engaging has leverage rather than saying, no, let's use the other term because it's more applicable. Assuming that people mean that, when I reject that premise.
Because when you're engaging with a theist, okay, when you have a conversation with two people, both of them bring to the table a burden of justification. Okay, a theist has a burden of justification to why they are a theist. An atheist also has a burden of justification to why they're an atheist. When they try to avoid that burden of justification by claiming a lack theist position, atheism, an atheist has a burden. That's the biggest takeaway. I think that people.
It depends on what definition you use.
Yeah, if you're in your definition, which I reject, they do. But under my definition, which I accept, they don't. So.
Yeah, this is the thing, though. If we're using the definition that you're using, I don't take the position that you think I'm taking.
But the problem with
the thing is if we have a conversation, Steve, and you was to say that you have evidence that Bigfoot exists, I don't have a burden of proof to prove that he doesn't.
But Stephen, here's the problem. I could say
Bigfoot is.
I could say as a theist.
That's what he's putting on people.
I can say as a theist. I lack a belief in the non-existence of God. Ergo, I have no burden to justify my theism position. That's a theist can do the exact same thing. They can play that exact same game.
It's not a game.
It is the same thing. No, it's exactly the same thing.
I lack a belief in the non-existence of Bigfoot. Then that's a position.
Hang on.
Is that your argument?
MP, I lack a belief in the non-existence of God. Ergo, I have no burden of justification. That is exactly what the presumption of atheism was by Anthony Flew in the 70s. That's his argument. And that's why I got shot down by academics, because they're like, no, atheists do have a burden of proof.
No.
But let's just flesh that out. I lack a belief in the non-existence of Bigfoot. That does that that logically it's not comforting.
MP, you must prove why you do not believe in.
No,
Bigfoot.
that's not what. No, Stephen, that's not what
he's saying. That's exactly what he's saying.
MP, please let me have a conversation with Stephen for a sec. Stephen, a burden of proof does not mean you have to prove anything. That's not what a burden of proof means. Burden of proof is in epistemics. Hang on. A burden of proof in a dialectic, okay, when you have an interlocutory going on and you have people in a discussion, that's not what the burden of proof means. Burden of proof in science means something that needs to be demonstrated, okay? If I want to say the evolutionary model is false, I have a burden of proof. The onus is upon me to demonstrate that is incorrect, okay? But in a discussion, like a back and forth, both parties have a burden of justification. All that means is that you have to justify why you hold a particular belief claim. It doesn't mean you prove to the other person your case. Okay, it's not like in a legal term. It's not like in a scientific term. It just means, are you justified to hold a particular dostastic claim? Okay, I'm a non-evidentialist, so I actually believe that you do not have to have an evidential reason or an empirical reason to hold a dostastic belief, and there's many reasons for that. I think most people, if they actually thought about it, are non-evidentialist in that regard.
Steve, I think you're missing the point again because
can I have a conversation with Stephen? Leslie, no offense. I've listened to you guys for years now. I'd like to get his opinion on this.
I've been here for 1 year, or not even a year, I think.
Okay, for a while now. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I engage with Stephen on this?
All right.
Thank you.
if you can bring this to the Bigfoot example, okay? So let's just say that we're sitting down and you are making the assertion that Bigfoot exists. Can you tell me how exactly I have a burden of proof?
Are you using it as a scientific claim?
It doesn't, like, in the context of a conversation where you're trying to, the purpose is rational discourse.
Okay, in a discourse, you need to, if I say I believe Bigfoot exists, and you say I believe Bigfoot doesn't exist, you have to tell me why you believe.
No.
Why not? That's a conversation. Yes.
No. It's very important that
this is argumentation theory.
No, but this is it. We start from the beginning, okay? Me and you were talking about, let's just say, football or something. I don't know why I brought football up. I hate it. But let's just say we're discussing anything. And you all of a sudden say, hey, I believe in the existence of Bigfoot. My question is, oh, why do you? And then you can present your evidence. My question is, how on earth do I have a burden of proof to prove not only that your evidence, that your assertion is wrong, but also prove that somehow Bigfoot doesn't exist? It seems to me that you have an incorrect. I don't want to jump too far, but it seems to me if that's the case, then your idea of epistemology is incorrect.
No, let me address this. Let me explain it first, because I know, Saka, you can explain it as well. Yeah. This is the epistemology, how it works. If you say, I believe Bigfoot does not exist, okay, I will say that. I believe Bigfoot doesn't exist. I can give reasons for that. Right? We're not.
So what if I say this?
Well, hang on. Forget the lack of belief. In an interlocutory, two people take a different position. One says, I believe A. One says, I believe not A. Okay? That is how an interlocutory should work.
No.
Yes, you cannot lay all the burden on the theist. That doesn't work that way.
And I am saying I'm not convinced in A. I don't think it fits. It meets its burden of proof.
But if an atheist says, I believe God does not exist, right? Well, let's narrow it down. Yeah, you agree. Okay. Now, wait. Let me finish. They say that. Now, if I say, as a theist, which I'm not, but let's assume that I'm a theist. I say, hey, Stephen, I'm a theist, but you know what? I don't believe that a God exists. I just lack a belief in the non-existence of God, which means the same thing. I'm just trying to avoid the burden of justification. You can't. Well, how are you going to get around that?
I disagree with you, and
I also disagree.
Go ahead, Saka.
Anybody rational disagrees.
So actually, no. Most people actually. This is a relatively simple point. So
I can tell you that most people I know that I've had a discussion with will side with me here and say
I would disagree on that. I will disagree on that fully. I can get 20 people in here now that agree with me on this.
So I think the confusions with this, Stephen, is that this confusion over what does it mean for there to be a burden of proof. Okay, and there's the legal sense of a burden of proof, which I'm sure MP is more than familiar with, which is that you have a burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. Whatever your position is. And then, one second.
There are different versions of the burden of proof, though. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that was my point.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. So there's a legal definition. There's a legal understanding of a burden of proof. When we talk about a burden of proof here within like the form of an argument or in a discourse here, in an argumentation theory, what we're talking about is justification. We're talking about the burden of justification, and the burden of justification doesn't have to be held for somebody else. It has to be held for yourself. Okay, this is for starting off with you. Okay, if I was to tell you that usually the invisible dragon in my garage. Okay, I have an invisible dragon in my garage.
Garage.
And yes, I have a burden. Okay, I have a burden of justification to myself to why I believe that. No, there might be good reasons, there might not be good reasons. Whatever, that doesn't matter. But that's to myself. I could be completely irrational in my beliefs about this because I don't have a good burden of justification for this. Now, for you, for hearing this claim here, you can lack belief in it. You can not believe it. Okay, but you lacking a belief or not believing it is going to have some type of causal relation to the claim itself. Why you don't believe it, why you reject it, and the burden. The burden there.
I will let you continue, but I'm just curious. Often, by the way, I will interrupt people. I don't mean to, but the reason I do so is because if you're working from a premise that I disagree
by all means,
with,
go ahead. No, that's fine. I believe the same thing. If somebody's working from a bad premise, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why I interrupt, by the way. I have the same philosophy, really, and still hunty there. I think if I don't agree with a premise, I want to move on. So when you say that you have an invisible dragon in your garage, and you're not making the assertion, it's just to yourself, that is personal. But when you assert it, especially if you try and like claim jurisdiction over my experience, like the case of religion, you have a burden of proof.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you agree. So me as somebody would just go, wow, that's quite an assertion, and remarkable claims require remarkable evidence. And I would say, all I have to say to you is, why do you believe that's the case? That's not a burden at this point. I'm sure you would agree. I'm just saying, why is that? And then you can present, if you have any. And if it doesn't stand to reason, let alone logic, then I can just go, sorry, you haven't met your burden of proof, and therefore I can
absolutely. Okay, and good, Stephen. Okay, stop there. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, so at that point right there, okay, you heard the explanation to why I might have an invisible dragon. You've concluded that it's the stupidest reason out there. I have not met my burden at all, and so did you feel that you are justified in saying that you do not believe my claim, right?
I can say that as it stands, I am not convinced of your assertion.
Okay, but are you justified in not believing my claim because I have not provided enough evidence?
So language is very important here because of this conversation. I could say to you that I am not convinced of your assertion.
Right, yeah, so you're not convinced. So that's the point. Okay, so now you consider that you have a good reason to reject that claim. How about this put that way? You have a good reason.
No, I don't have a good reason. I just don't accept your reason for the assertion.
Okay. Do you think that it's important to have a good reason to believe in something?
If you're going to assert that you believe in something, not that you're not convinced of something, but believe in something, okay, you should have valid reason. And if you're going to claim jurisdiction over the experience of others, you must.
I'm not, Stephen. You're jumping the shark on here on this one. So let's say we're talking about flat earthers. Okay. Sure. All right. So flat earther comes along and says, "Listen, I don't know what shape the Earth is, but I'm not convinced that it's round."
Yep.
Are they justified?
That's a contradiction. You said that he was a flat earther. That means he believes the Earth is flat.
Okay. within the conversation of these people, okay, they might say that they don't know what shape the Earth is. They're not going to make any positive claim to what the shape of the Earth is, but they reject the notion that the Earth is round because they don't feel that they have been convinced by this. Do you think that that's a rational position?
So the example that you raise is a contradiction. They're saying, in one hand, I don't know, which means that they don't have a burden of proof. But then the very next sentence that you said was, I know that it's not round, which is an assertion, which does have a burden of proof. When it comes to atheism, I'm saying,
Stephen, if I said that, then
don't cut him off, Saka. Don't cut him off.
Okay, shut up for a second, please. So within that, okay, if someone says that
I don't believe that the Earth is not round. I lack a belief the Earth is round.
Yeah, I don't know what shape the Earth is, except I don't believe that it's round.
Right.
Okay. Do they have a burden at that point in time?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, what burden do they have?
They're saying I lack a belief that the Earth is round.
Yeah.
You guys want to let them answer.
So first of all, like I'll try and put this very. I'm going to try and repeat your position. Tell me if I get the description of what you're saying. They are saying, I don't believe that it's. I'm not convinced that it's. I don't know was the first statement that you said. I don't know the state of whether the world's round or flat or whatever. I don't know. At that point, there's no burden of proof because they're just saying I don't know, which is the following words that you've used. I do know that it's not round.
Saka didn't say that.
I didn't say that.
Therefore, they have a burden of proof.
No, I didn't say that. That's not what he said.
He said I believe.
Okay. They said that I don't know what shape the Earth is. Okay, but I am not convinced. I lack a belief, or I don't believe in it that it's round.
So really, what you're saying is they're saying the same thing twice. They're saying that I don't know what the Earth is. I don't know what shape the Earth is. I don't know what shape the Earth is. But they're just using a particular example on the second part.
Yeah.
Would that be?
Yeah.
No, there's no. So when someone, so your question is, when someone says, Yeah, they're just saying the same thing twice, but they're using it through very confusing words. If what they mean, and you understand what they mean when they say that the Earth isn't round, you understand that they're not making the assertion that the Earth is not round. They're actually just repeating what.
Okay, let me try to make it even simpler. Let me try to make it even simpler then. Okay, you come up to somebody, you know, and for some reason they say, you know what, this round.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have a burden of justification?
No.
Yes. So if they say, hang on, wait. So if they say, I do not believe that the Earth is round.
I'm not convinced that the Earth is round. I'm not convinced.
I'm not convinced that the world is round.
No, there's no burden of proof. So far as I can understand. So let me repeat that one last time, so I can definitely get that for sure.
There's a phone quake there.
Is that right?
That's a phone quake. They'll be back shortly.
Oh, fair enough. If we can clarify what he was saying. Sorry, I got slightly confused. It's quite late here. So he was saying, can someone repeat?
Yeah, he said, if someone comes up to you and he says, I do not believe the Earth is round, which means the same as I'm not convinced that the Earth is round. Yeah. They would not have the burden of proof, and I agree with you on that.
Yeah, they don't have a burden of proof. It just means that they're not convinced by the evidence. Now the evidence might be overwhelming, and that they're not.
That's another story.
Yeah. But yeah, no, there's no burden of proof there. This is the problem with this situation. Okay. People think that atheists have a burden. They don't. Not unless they.
So Stephen, here's the thing: is that I'll tell you what my position is on this one. Is the notion that you can not believe something, or the notion that you can laugh something without justification, is completely irrational. Okay.
Sorry.
Is that if
some started there? Can you repeat that? Sorry. Can you say that again?
The idea that you can lack a belief in something or not believe something without justification is irrational. Because if you cannot provide a reason for why you reject a belief, or if you cannot present a reason for why you do not believe something, that what you're saying is that I have no reason to reject this claim. I have no reason not to believe this. I have no reason to lack a belief. And if you have no reason to have that position, then you have no justification. You are irrational for even holding it to begin with.
Are you saying that No, sorry, I've got a good point here. Really, following from what you just said, you believe in everything until you have a valid reason not to. That's
exactly what I was going to say.
Not the way it works. The words that you just use, you believe in absolutely everything until you have a reason not to, and that's just demonstrably not how it works.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's exactly what he said. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Exactly.
That's a fine way to look at it.
He believes all claims.
But that's not.
That's not where it comes from. That doesn't follow. Is that I believe absolutely everything. Okay.
Your words were, unless you have a good reason to not believe in something, you have a burden of proof. Which
that's not. I think that's not at all what soccer.
Right.
Yeah. I don't. How you.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah. That you can't.
On the other end of it is that you have to have good reasons to reject a belief. You have to have good reasons to lack a belief. You have good reasons to not believe something. You also have to have good reasons to believe something. You have to have good reasons to hold the opposite positions of this as well.
But these are that's a second order belief, though. That's the problem. I agree with you 100%, but that's a second order belief. The first order belief is dealing with the proposition, right? God exists or God does not exist. That is the first order belief. The lack of belief, saying why you don't agree with it, that's a second order belief.
Sorry, Steve. Can you repeat who you agree with there?
I agree with Sokka. Yeah, Sokka. I mean, Sokka and myself and Ozzy. We all. I think the three of us.
You think you have to prove? You have to have good reason to not believe in something.
I think you have to have. I think you have to have. Why do I get asked the question, then somebody else tries to answer?
I'm sorry.
I think you have to have a. I think you have to. I think you have to have
Steve too.
I think you have to have a burden of justification.
That's because there's two Steves in here. That's why.
I think you have to have a burden of justification for anything that you think, and a lack of belief to me. Now, again, I don't. It's make an argument otherwise, but to me, even if I say I lack a belief in somebody, I need to give reasons for that. I have to be justified why I lack a belief. But that is a second order belief to the proposition.
I think we are talking past each over each other, because what Stephen is saying when he says, if he says, I'm not convinced that Bigfoot exists. He has not
okay,
a burden
back to the
of
Bigfoot thing.
Hold on, I was not done yet.
Let him talk.
If Stephen is saying I'm not convinced that Bigfoot exists, he does not have a burden of justification to prove that Bigfoot doesn't exist, but he is still.
We're not talking about proving anything.
No. Steve,
Nestle, this is the
Can you let him finish though, at least?
But this is what. Remember,
Steve, I think he's about to agree with you. Let him finish.
Sorry, as a guest, if I can say the understanding my position is Nez.
Yeah,
I just want to point that out. That seems to be getting the position quite well here. I'm saying that if there's a difference between saying I know something doesn't exist and saying that I'm not convinced that something exists, and atheism is just saying I'm not convinced by what evidence you've just presented.
Yeah,
exactly. That's the point, man. That's the point, and that is it. That is your burden of justification. You've just met it. Is that
and that's what I was going to say too.
And I was
by the way,
what?
I didn't know I did that.
Okay, first of all, Ozzy has just said.
You have provided at this point in time that you not only have you lack a belief, you have now cited the reasons for why yet you are unconvinced. And I'm pretty sure that if we chase this down further, because you're not convinced, and because you're not convinced, I'm assuming you're not convinced because you can relate this to like I said, you can. Sorry,
why don't you ask him, Saka?
What? You're missing. When you ask me why am I not convinced that God exists, my answer is because I'm not convinced by the evidence that you have or have not presented.
You met your burden of justification. There you go. That's what we're saying. You just did it.
There you go. You just provided justification.
Exactly.
When I restate what I was going to say before I was cut off, please.
No, stop for a quick second, okay? All right.
Oh my God.
See, you just did it. You provided that is. You did not have to prove the other point.
Right.
You have met the burden of justification for why you have rejected.
All you need to do. That's why I stopped. That's why I stopped Nestle. When Nestle said you have to prove something, his premise is wrong. A burden of proof doesn't mean you have to prove anything.
I wasn't done yet. I
finished, Nestle. I know Nestle kind of agrees with all of us, but go ahead, Nestle.
Yeah. Let Nestle finish.
I was going to say, begin from the start. If he is saying, I'm not convinced that Bigfoot exists, he has the reason he can give, or the reason he should give, is I'm not convinced because there is not enough evidence to demonstrate the existence of Bigfoot. But he has no burden of proof to prove that Bigfoot doesn't exist. That's the distinction between
But nobody's saying that he does. But nobody says that he does.
Say it, finally.
But why? Okay, but that's never been. Hang on. Why does that matter?
We said this about 15 minutes ago.
Nobody has made that argument, Nestle.
Can I switch this on its head because we're going to go around.
That's exactly what.
No.
If I can present it in the opposite, in a different way, where you're on the back foot, could I do that, please?
But that is why I said you are talking past each other. When Stephen is saying he has no justification for his lack of conviction, he's saying he has no justification to prove the negative. But when you are saying he has
we're not talking about proving anything.
Well, I wasn't done yet, Steve. Come on.
And then hurry up.
Oh, shut the fuck up.
If you
can go on his long diatribe, so let the guy finish talking.
Yeah.
Sorry,
cheerleading.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nestle. Go ahead.
Through, you've got several versus me. It makes sense to give him a bit of time to articulate the points that he's making, because so far he seems to be making coherent sense.
All right, go ahead, Nestle. Yeah, I'm trying to get Nestle to finish. I thought he did, but then he's continuing on. Go ahead.
When Stephen is saying he does not have a justification, he's trying to say he doesn't have the justification to prove the negative. But when you are saying he does have the burden of justification, you are saying he has to give a reason for his lack of conviction.
Okay.
And I'm done.
Okay. So
if I can put it in another way as well. When you say, this is my evidence that I present for the belief that Bigfoot exists, I do have to address the evidence. I do have to say, let me look at the evidence and say, hey, I'm not convinced of this evidence because this is fallacious or this doesn't support what you just said, such as the poll. I don't think the poll supports what you're saying. I'm I am in a position where I need to address the evidence you're presenting, but I'm not in a position where I have to prove that Bigfoot doesn't exist.
Okay, and Stephen, but you agree though? None of it. Hang on, Saga, let me please. Stephen, you do agree? Stephen, one second. Stephen, real quick, you do agree? Nobody here is saying you have to prove anything. It's not about proving anything. That's not what a burden of proof means in epistemics. Okay, we're talking about epistemology here, right? That's not what a burden of proof means. A burden of proof is synonymous with a burden of justification. You have a burden of justification to yourself why you believe something, not to anybody else. To yourself. You don't prove it to yourself. Hang on. Let me finish.
I have to justify what I do believe in.
But you just moved back to the other example of burden of proof that we're not using. Okay, we're not telling you.
Now we are talking past each other again. So sorry.
Burden of proof, burden of justification.
They're the same thing.
They mean the same things, unless I'm missing the point. To make this very easy, could you please write out the definition of how you're using burden of proof?
Yeah, had to have a warrant for an epistemic justification to why you hold a particular belief.
Could you write it down for me? I just respond better to the writing. If you could put it in the group chat, that'd be great.
Saka, can you do it?
But the lack of conviction is not a belief, right?
A lack of conviction is not a belief. Exactly. It's not a belief. It's a lack of conviction. And the difference...
Well, but so one could argue that you're believing... You believe that the person has not made their case, right? That is a belief.
What I'm saying is I am... No. Belief... Drop the word belief. I am saying I'm not convinced by the case that is made. To go back to the court analogy, you have someone saying, here is the presentation if this person is guilty. I am not saying he is innocent and making that assertion. I am saying I am not convinced the evidence doesn't line up. The difference is really important. One of them has a burden of proof. If I say that he's innocent, I need to present evidence. If I say that your evidence doesn't substantiate the assertion that you're making, it isn't sufficient, and especially if I can show that it's not sufficient by revealing that it's fallacious, then there's no burden of proof. All I've done is said that you have to make your burden.
You just described what the burden of proof is. Okay, so let me give you the definition here. Okay, there's for the philosophical burden of boost or burden of proof. Sorry,
if that's not too much to ask.
I'll put it in the external chat.
Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to do the external because it'll show everything and it messes everything up. So if somebody else can write it in the group chat, he means group, not external. There is no external chat for this.
The burden of proof is the obligation on a party in a dispute to provide sufficient warrant for their position.
Kind of what I said.
I'm fine with that, and I insist that with that definition, it works exactly how I've been using it.
So what if your position is that you...
I'm not making an assertion. There's nothing substantial.
You don't have to make an assertion. It's just talking about the sufficient warrant for your position. So the sufficient warrant for lack of belief, sufficient warrant for what you don't believe. That's what you're providing. And you already have. You understand this because you've already given the examples to why you would reject a claim. Not enough evidence, or that it's unconvincing or whatever like that. Those are examples of somebody giving a burden of justification or a burden of proof for why they reject something. Okay, this is natural.
I think I understand it. I think I understand where you're coming from. If you present evidence and then I tell you why I don't accept that evidence, you would say that's me fulfilling my burden. Would that be?
Yes, absolutely. That's it.
No, I think you're dead wrong. That's a case of me saying that you haven't met your burden of proof. The difference is really important.
Which is itself justification.
Which is in itself.
If you say you haven't met,
different positions here.
If you say you haven't met, if you say you have not provided evidence for warrants to fit me to change my position, that's sufficient reason for me to hold my position. You're giving your justification. You just don't realize it.
Say it again. Sorry. There was a slight give there.
If you saying to the other person, look, you've given me no evidence by which I can evaluate anything. I can't accept your position, so you haven't convinced me to change my mind. You just by saying that, you've met your own burden of justification to why you hold a position or why you don't believe that. That's it. That's all it's required.
Very important. I would not say that there was any burden of proof that I met. I would say that I said what I'm saying is that your burden of proof wasn't met. That's all I'm saying. I'm not making.
Well, no, because each person has their own burden of proof. It's not like that's not what you again. Now you're switching to the other meaning of the burden of proof. This because they haven't met their burden of proof. That their burden of proof is to themselves too. They have a burden of proof to themselves, right?
So we've been doing this for like 15 minutes. Let's just switch the script slightly, but we're on the same subject, okay? we're in a debate here, and I assert to you that orbiting around Jupiter is an invisible, transcendent teapot.
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond to that claim? Do you believe it? Because I've said it.
No. And
okay,
I don't believe it because
I present evidence.
Well, what's your evidence?
The evidence that I present. The evidence I present is that I can feel it inside me. Do you accept that evidence?
No.
No.
So you would say, and I would say, I failed to justify my burden of proof because I didn't present sufficient evidence.
No, but your burden of proof you may have fulfilled it to yourself. I've had subjective things that only I know of, that I can believe something that I can't convince somebody else, but my burden of proof of why I believe something has no relevancy on if I convince you if it's true or not.
No, but if you're in a conversation, then you do have
burdens.
There you go.
Exactly. Both people in a conversation have a burden. Two people in an interlocutory have a burden. Yes, two people in a conversation.
All we're going to go around I'm telling you right now, if I do not assert something, I do not have a burden of proof. That's not how it works. It's ludicrous. You believe anything unless you can prove that it doesn't exist.
And we've been arguing this with them for years. They will not get it.
I'm beginning to agree with Steve now, because Steve, now you are switching constantly between the context of the burden of proof. Because
I am, or he is? Wait, who is?
Yeah, when Steve is saying you have a burden of proof.
Me?
Sorry, the burden. When Steve is saying, Steve McRae is saying you have a burden of proof, or a burden of justification. He's saying you have to provide a reason for why you are not convinced, and saying I am not convinced because of the lack of evidence. That is enough.
But so me saying, for example, that I am not convinced by the evidence that you just presented.
That is enough, yes.
Yeah, is the equivalent of me saying I do not think that you have fulfilled your burden of proof.
Yes.
Not me asserting anything, and therefore there is no burden of proof. I think what's happening here. This is a rare situation where we really do understand each other's position, but we fervently disagree. And we've got to the point where we're debating epistemology, but we're not using the same epistemology as you. You find that there's serious flaws, because you can't have a conversation if you don't use the same language.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We're not using the same language.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I just find that most.
I actually don't think that I can convince you that atheism is the label that you should take, because it seems to be that you're not flexible on these things. But the idea that an atheist has burden of proof is just ludicrous to me. It really is.
That's why I find it funny, because in philosophy, atheism, defined as a belief, requires a burden of justification, because all beliefs do.
No. According to some philosophers and some
overwhelming in philosophy. I've never met a PhD in philosophy that doesn't agree with that, and we know quite a few. Not one.
I've met loads. My university, there's plenty. This is
there it is. You got to meet them, Steve.
Well, they're definitely not American.
We're now appealing.
So they actually say atheism is not a belief.
Well, what's wrong with having a reason for being an atheist? What's the problem there?
I don't care if somebody's an atheist.
Is there any problem with having a reason for yourself being an atheist?
You just have to justify.
Can I help Stephen by this? For example, if I ask you, provide your reason for why you are an atheist. That's not saying you have a burden of proof to prove that the non-existence of God. Not necessarily, depending on the definition you use of atheist.
This is it. If you say to me, why are you an atheist? My reply isn't because I don't think there's a God, because there's flaws in nature, because of this, because of that. My answer is that they haven't met their burden of proof.
Yeah, and that is the reason that Steve is asking you when he asks you to provide or to justify your lack of conviction.
So how would you phrase the question exactly?
Let's see. You are not convinced that God exists. Let's, for argument's sake, define it as atheism. So you're if I ask you by Steve's definition of burden of justification, can you justify your reason for your atheism? And you reply, I am an atheist because there is not enough evidence for me to be convinced that a God exists. That is the justification. Enough.
Right, I agree with that.
Not quite. So when you,
it is sufficient.
Why are you an atheist? My response is the assertions that there is a God or gods, all of the ones of which I've looked at, and I've looked at a great deal, do not meet their burden of proof.
Yeah, that is your justification for your lack of conviction.
But it's not. Do you think I have to justify my lack of conviction in?
No. Well, what you just stated, the lack of evidence for this claim is your justification for your lack of conviction.
Yeah. So it's a Okay, right. So I can justify
it if to no one else you have to justify it to yourself, Stephen.
Wait, well, I think I know where you're coming from.
Go ahead, Stephen.
If you want my justification for why I am an atheist, then I can say it's because I'm not convinced of the assertion there is a God or a gods, and I don't think the evidence stands to merit.
Yes.
Okay.
If you want to say that that's somehow related to a burden of proof, if you want to define a burden of proof as being able to justify yourself, then fine. If you want to use that definition, I really have not really where that is. Philosophy, I'm fairly certain a burden of proof does not mean that.
Okay, that's what I want to clarify. If I may, Stephen, if I want to clarify, do you
what seems to happen in this whole conversation, by the way, and it kind of relates back to the atheist issue. It's like you want to discuss with me using philosophical terms or terms that are not used colloquially. If your point is to have a conversation with me or anyone, you're better off like really using the terms that they're using, not going, but you know, if you use this definition or the American philosophical version of burden of proof or whatnot, it's like.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think people need to change philosophy and change how things are to have a conversation. When we say, look, if you have a belief, every belief needs to be justified. Would you agree with that? Any belief needs to be justified to yourself.
A positive belief needs to be justified.
Okay, to yourself.
Yes, I would say so.
Okay, so if nobody else is around, you would agree you have a burden of justification.
It depends on what. Like, let's just say, for example, I think it's going to rain.
Can I help you with that? For example, nobody believes anything for no reason. For example, if I had the experience of being abducted by aliens, my experience is justification for myself into believing that.
Yes.
But not for somebody else.
No, I know where you're coming from. I wouldn't say it's justification. I'd say that
that's
you've
what the
experienced
philosophical justification is, though.
But I would say, because we know that humans can hallucinate, and you know, because we have all of the evidence that your own testimony is actually very, very bad, you don't have justification for it. You may, to you, this is it.
I'm saying for yourself. Seeing is believing, but seeing is not knowing.
But justification goes to rationality, right? And that's like, to be rational, you need to justify. And if you can give a good warrant to why you are justified to believing what you believe in, you are by definition rational, whether the event actually happened or not.
Yeah.
But doesn't it? Would you not say it depends on the claim? Like, if I was to say,
sorry.
Go ahead, Stephen.
If I was to say that the Earth is not a sphere, then I have quite the burden of proof, because I have to deal with the copious amounts of evidence to the contrary of my position. Whereas if I say that I don't believe in aliens that visit Earth and always visit America and always for some reason draw a hole in someone's garden and then just disappear, the burden of proof is different, because there isn't an enormous amount of evidence to contend with that is contrary to my position. So different assertions mean different things. But when it comes to atheism, I'm not actually asserting anything. I'm just saying that I don't accept someone's assertion.
Right, but you're saying atheism is not a belief ever, right?
Yeah, under his definition, atheism is not a belief.
Right, and to me, I'm the opposite. To me, atheism is a belief. Period. However, I accept there's another. Let me finish. Let me finish. Yeah, I can't finish here, Nestle.
Sorry.
To me, I am happy with the definition of atheism being a belief. He's saying that doesn't make any sense, but that is the definition given in philosophy. If people don't want to use it, I'm okay with that. That's not the argument.
This is an appeal.
No, it's not an appeal.
You're not circles. I've said earlier that I'm willing to tentatively accept that in philosophical circles, that's what atheism means.
Okay, because that's a start. That's a start. Okay. Because people say people come in and say atheism is not a belief.
When I talk to people that identify with the word, that's what matters. It's not what some philosophers in America think, or, you know, if you're trying to talk with people, if you're trying to convince people, you need to use the words they're using. It just feels just as disingenuous as saying to a Christian that you believe that there's a man in the sky, because that's how, you know, some people in some sphere define Christianity. I understand it's not the best analogy that I'm going off there. Like I said, it is quite late here, so I will have to wrap up at some point. But I do understand your position. I will say that I really do reject the idea that we have a burden of proof. I don't. If you define it in the way that you, in some particular way, do we have to justify why we don't believe something? Yes, but that's not a burden of proof in the same sense as the assertion.
We can call it something completely different, Stephen. That's okay. You know, like if you don't want to call that a burden of proof or burden of justification, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point still stands that whatever you want to call this, whether you want to call it, let's just simply call it reasons for rejecting. Okay, is that in order to reject a belief, okay, to lack a belief or whatever, like along that line, is that you should have a good reason to reject a belief. And even if that good reason is simply that they have not provided sufficient evidence, you're still providing what you would call a good reason for it.
Yeah. No, I understand where you're coming from. Let's just change the word reject for dismiss.
Okay, sure. Dismiss. That's fine. Now, the
word reject carries connotation, as I'm sure you know, it actually relates exactly to the topic of this debate.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So it's just a semantic point there, but it kind of illustrates the whole issue here. So yes, I do say that you need justification, but calling that burden of proof, when you talk about burden of proof, again, to most people, they mean the other definition.
Okay. Yeah, and that's fine. You know, if it's using that type of sense. Again, this is.
And likewise, by the way, if you want to say that that's a definition, fine. If you want to call it a burden proof, call it a burden proof. If you want to call it kerfuffle, call it kerfuffle. But if the point is to have an honest conversation where you really want to convince people, it's better to use the terms that people seem to identify with most, and at the very least, put down these definitions, you know, very explicitly.
Yeah.
I hope that when I listen to this back, that I haven't missed you doing that. If I have, I apologize in advance, but I don't think I have. It seems that this discussion comes down to epistemology and the strict definition of terms. And the sad thing is that we want the same outcome. I think that seems to be the case. We want to be better represented. And we're getting bogged down on terms and on definitions when really the sad thing is that these conversations are getting bogged down on terms, negatively impacts our presence as a community. And really we should be focusing on representing ourselves correctly. And I still maintain that the best way to do that, even though you don't agree with the word, is to use the word atheist. Because that way you do have value, you are represented, and you can say to other communities, stop claiming special rights. It's not fair.
Can I just say this real quick?
So just one, can I just respond to that point real quick, Steve?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, Stephen, I agree with what you're saying, and that's fine. I think that one of the important things to take from this is that when we talk about these what we call the burden justifications, whatever we can call it, the reason for why, you know, the justification for why one dismisses a belief, okay, is that those are indistinguishable. Those reasons that one would put for rejecting or dismissing a belief, you know, that so that they do not believe a claim or that they lack a belief in the claim. The reasons that one person would cite for that are indistinguishable from the reasons for why one would affirm that no gods exist, that they hold a belief in the opposite proposition. Is that on the surface that the series of beliefs that person holds are almost identical. So when we try to make these separations, when we try to say things like, well, it's not that I believe that no gods exist, it's that I don't believe gods exist, or I lack a belief that gods exist, or they provide the same, they are required to at least have the same type of justifications for why they dismiss the claim as a person that would affirm the claim that no gods exist. So they're almost indistinguishable from each other. So in that sense, and this is the view that I have, in that sense, is that epistemically there's nothing different between the claim that I believe that no gods exist and the claim that I simply lack a belief that gods exist, because
I have to disagree with that.
If I can,
that's horribly bad. I disagree with that too.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
and I'm sure you're going to be able to give me some great reasons.
Yeah.
Before he does that, can I say what I was going to say first?
No.
All right.
No, I'm just kidding.
Because I think Stephen makes some very valid points, and I'm agreeing with him demographically and the whole thing. I do agree with him on that. But I think that we're missing the point that when I see atheists engage with a well-educated theist, and we have many of them. We have one right here, General, for example, very educated, and they're being told, well, in philosophical standards, atheism is a belief. It requires a burden of justification. That's a fact according to academics. Okay, you may not like it, but that's a fact. Now you can say, well, yeah, I'm a man on the street, colloquial, doesn't go by that. Okay, I get that. But when somebody takes that man on the street colloquial type of argumentation to a theist that knows what they're talking about and says, well, yeah, atheists never have a burden of belief, or burden of justification, or atheism is never a belief. And the theist looks at them and says, well, you're just an idiot. That's not how it is, and tries to explain it to them. That's where I see the problems lies, because it makes a lot of atheists look a lot less philosophically knowledgeable and a lot more naive than they should. That's why
we were talking about the definition of atheism, right? And the definition itself is disbelief or lack of belief in the existence of a God, and that's all it means. It means I don't believe in God.
No, disbelief is actually a belief in the negative.
No, that's not what Steve is saying.
That's not what I'm saying.
I'm sorry. A belief is not a disbelief. A disbelief is a disbelief.
That's not what I'm saying.
Steve is saying it's a belief that gods don't exist. Yes. That's what atheism is.
A disbelief is not a belief.
It's not
a disbelief.
Not a belief. Okay. Can I address through Sokko's example, please, before we go off too far?
Yes. Go ahead.
Sokko, correct me if I'm wrong, was saying that you've got one person that's saying that they believe in a God and they have to justify it. Just use the word justify. And you have one person saying that they do not accept this claim and they have to justify why they don't. And he said that they're using, in principle, exactly the same reasons. I disagree with this. It's a completely different game. One of them is making an assertion that something, of anything, an assertion. And so their justification, not to use the word burden of proof, their justification is to give reasons as to why they can make that assertion. The other person isn't making assertions or providing evidence for a belief, again. He's just saying that he's addressing the points that he's risen, saying, I do not think that those lead to the conclusion that you're getting. Yeah, they can say it's fallacious. The difference is really important because one of them is making an assertion and one of them is just saying, I don't accept this assertion. Both have to justify themselves. I admit this. But the difference is the burden of proof. I'm not entirely sure how I can articulate it much, but I don't know if that resonates with you guys. But
no, it's not a good opinion.
Yeah, what it sounds like you're saying is that there's a difference between a burden of justification and what somebody's saying things have to be justified versus a burden of proof.
What he's saying,
it seems like they're conflating the two by saying everything has to be justified, but when you're talking about a position having a burden of proof, that's a different context.
Yeah,
it's not the same thing.
And we're saying the same thing, though. There is a different in the epistemological context of burden of justification set up by Sextus Empiricus, if I'm not mistaken. Back when he was having this problem with the criterion, he set this up of what it meant to be rational in your thinking, what it meant to have a warrant for your justification. This has been long standing since like the 2nd and 3rd century, right? When people are conflating it there and saying, oh, well, a burden of proof means that you have to actually prove something to demonstrate, like again in science or in law, they're not these same things. We're talking about different concepts, and I think that's where the confusion lies. Right, but it goes back to my argument again, though. If people don't understand the distinctions and they go up against a theist, and the theist says, well, in academics, atheism is defined as a belief, and you can find many sources, as I've sent them to Stephen myself. Atheism is the belief that and they say, well, no, it's not. It's never the case. Then they're automatically wrong, because there is sources out there. There are books that are academically standards in Stanford and Oxford and SEP that state that this is what it is. And when they say no, it is not that.
You could say, like I would say in a conversation with someone like that, if they're saying I'm using this definition of atheism, then I'd say, well, under that definition, I am not an atheist.
That's fine.
And but then if I'm having a conversation with someone else and they're saying, well, atheist is this, then I'll say, okay, I'll use that definition.
As long as they recognize there's more than one.
I am. That's so.
My biggest pet peeve is when I have an atheist that only says there's one definition, and that's it. They say atheism is just a lack of belief, nothing else. That's it. Period. They're automatically wrong because we can demonstrate there are other definitions of that.
the definition is not wrong or right. They have usages.
I didn't say the definition was right or wrong.
Right.
That's not what I said. I said they're automatically wrong by saying that atheism is just a lack of belief, because there are other definitions out there, right?
I agree with that. There are other definitions.
That's my argument. So when they come in and say there's only one definition, that's it. That's what I've been saying from the get-go. No, if you want to accept that one, great. That's not my argument.
I don't think you heard what Ad said.
If you can agree that it's a matter of personal usage, then we should stop this topic.
But I've always said that. My point is when
I have one more question that I just want to ask, because someone Neslig has put in the comment section, and I'm curious to what you think. Do you accept that not believing in X is not the same as believing in not X?
Soccer.
Huh?
Sorry, what?
Huh?
Suka?
What?
Suka.
Osaka.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. What am I asking? What am I answering?
Sorry, no, that was to like the people which basically don't have the same position as me, and it was a question that's asked in the comment section. I'm just curious on your take on it. Would you say that not believing in X is not the same as believing in not X?
The wording on that is really weird. As someone who does not believe, like I do not.
For example, okay. if I say I don't believe that Bigfoot exists, is that the same as saying I believe Bigfoot doesn't exist?
No, that's a false dichotomy.
Yes. These things are not the same.
Right. That's exactly what
the same.
We don't want that. We don't want beliefs to be dichotomous, right? That's the words of Alex Malpass. We don't want beliefs to be dichotomous. We want the dichotomy to be between theism and not theism, but beliefs can be quite varied, right? My beliefs on a particular topic are not contingent upon the ontological nature of something. If God exists or doesn't exist, my beliefs on that can be completely different. I can have multiple different beliefs, even though ontologically speaking, it's one or the other, right? That's the dichotomy. He exists or he does not exist. My belief on those propositions don't have to be dichotomous.
Yeah, and I think that, so if I understand the question, 1 second, sorry.
Tyler's like, that's not a dichotomy. How is theism and non-theism not a dichotomy? That is absolutely a dichotomy. Be or not be. Theism or not theism. That's a dichotomy.
Go ahead. It's okay.
So
I'm sorry.
MP Soccer is going to answer.
So to answer that question, I think that what I was saying is that they're not the same, but they provide the same they require the same epistemic justification for that. So what I'm saying is that the epistemic justification that's being provided for why one rejects a belief and not believes it is also the same type of justification you're going to see presented by people who believe in the opposite.
I don't necessarily think so. I don't think so. For example, let's take the analogy of if I'm holding a coin in my hand, it is a fact. It's either tails or heads, right? Tails or heads. So if I'm claiming it is heads, and you say, "Oh, it is." I don't agree. It is heads. You're not saying it is tails.
Correct.
And your justification for not agreeing it is heads is not the same if you were to argue for why it is tails.
Right, and that's my exactly. And I agree with that. That's my point for agnosticism. I'm not saying it's tails. I'm not saying it's heads. Even though the dichotomy is one or the other. My position is I don't know which one it is. I'm not choosing either side. I'm not choosing agnosticism. I'm not choosing theism. I'm not picking either one. That's the position I take.
Yeah. So
I lack a belief in both.
That would be a position for agnosticism.
Yes.
But if somebody comes around and says that like I believe that God exists. Okay, sorry. I believe someone comes around and they make the claim that God exists, and you ask for their evidence to support that claim because you've never heard this concept before, or even let's pick a brand new concept. They're just called Concept X, that they believe Concept X exists, and you're like, oh, okay, well that's interesting. Can you give me some the reasons why you believe Concept X exists? And they give you some really bad fallacious reasoning for this concept that you just came up with. Well, you'd reject that. You'd be like, well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that because I don't feel like this person has presented a good enough argument to sway me in me accepting this as a position that I can believe in. On the same token, somebody that can come along and says that they don't believe that. It's like, well, I don't believe that's true. would have come from the same position. Like, I don't believe that's true, because this person is, has this concept that they're not articulating. It's fallacious in its nature. They can reject it for the same reasons for the same person that's going to, simply say this, like, well, I don't believe that. So from when I say that on an epistemic position, the lack of belief or the not believing a claim can be very similar to the person that's actually affirming that they don't believe it, does exist there. So I'm saying that those positions can be indistinguishable from each other.
No, they are distinguishable, because if go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I have to go soon, by the way, because I'm getting quite tired.
We're gonna wrap this up. We're gonna wrap this up in 10 minutes.
I want to argue why you are a fish.
Yes,
I want to wrap this up in a few minutes. Can let me finish this up. I want to ask Stephen something, because this is a really pertinent question. But do you think that there are people out there that really believe God does not exist? They believe if you say, look, in the universe, is there gods? They would say no, there's no gods in the universe. But when they have a discussion, they will retreat into this, oh, well, atheism is just a lack of position, in order to avoid that justification. Because you agree, if they say, look, the universe is devoid of gods, they have a burden. I think we all agree that's the case, right? That's a positive affirmation. Do you agree there are people out there that will actually... I can't hear three people at once.
It's really hard.
What's that, Stephen?
I haven't said a whole lot, but that's just like going to proving a negative.
Sorry, David, didn't mean to talk over you, but if somebody says that they know that there is no God,
no, they believe. They don't. It's not knowledge. They believe. I believe.
They believe that.
They believe that the universe is devoid of gods.
How you define belief, doesn't it? It depends on how you define believe. If you define believe as in this is just what my current conviction is, then maybe they don't have a burden of proof. But if they mean by believe that they are quite positive, this is the problem when it comes to definitions. I do want to quickly address Saku's position and explain why it's not the same. We're confusing burden of proof, if you will, with justification. I admit, if you've got two people and one person asserts a claim, be anything, like claims that the Earth is a sphere. Let's go for a different one. Claims that Bigfoot exists. And this person says that they are not convinced that Bigfoot exists. They're not playing the same justification game. So one of them will say, this is how I'm propping up my belief, my conviction, and they will present evidence. This person isn't doing the same game and presenting evidence for why it's not the case. It's addressing the evidence, the burden, the justification given by the party with the burden of proof, the assertion, and it's saying, or he is saying, I do not think that this presentation that you've given fits your conclusion. I think it's fallacious, etc. And therefore, the difference is really important, because one of them is trying to justify an assertion, and one of them is trying to justify why they don't accept an assertion.
So let me address that, Stephen. Okay, for specifically for the example of Bigfoot. Okay, so somebody comes along and says, that you have two positions. You have one person that says, I don't believe in Bigfoot, because at this point in time, I figure that, we would have at least found evidence of Bigfoot's existence. That we would have found a body or something, Bigfoot droppings out in the woods or whatever. And then you have another person that says, I don't believe Bigfoot exists. Or sorry, I believe that Bigfoots do not exist, because we would have found evidence for them. We would have found droppings out in the woods, or at least a dead Bigfoot by now. They provided exactly the same justification, one for the affirmative, one for simply holding the position of why they don't believe.
So my answer is, in that case, yeah, they both have a burden of proof, because one of them is basically saying...
one of them just said that he doesn't believe. That's it. And he's prevented his justification.
Don't cut him off.
His justification was bad. He said, basically, he was saying there's absence of evidence, and therefore that's evidence of absence. That's a fallacy. That's a bad way of arguing. Whereas that's not what I'm saying as an atheist. I'm just saying that the evidence that's presented for this is wrong. Well, I will, by the way, say, I could have made this more clear earlier on, there are some gods that I know doesn't exist, because they cannot exist by definition, because they're defined in a way that they just can't. So it depends on the god as well. So some gods, I will say, I know that god doesn't exist. It cannot exist, because it's a violation of everything we understand. It's self-contradictory, etc. I'm sure you can think of examples of examples yourself. It's just when it comes to these loose weave definitions where you have to go, look, technically I'm agnostic if you want to play that game, but I'm just as agnostic about the existence of God as I'm just as agnostic over the belief of fairies and Bigfoot. But I won't go around, we're basically going in circles, and I'll be honest with you, I'm quite tired, so I am going to.
No problem. Let's wrap this up.
Sure.
Steve, I'll tell you what. No, Nestle, I got to wrap this up. I got to wrap this up. So Stephen, I do want to thank you so much for coming in. These conversations do get heated on sometimes on the Sunday show. It happens, but everybody loves each other. We all do group hugs, kissy, or whatever. But later on, sometime in the future, I want to have more of an off-air, just you and I. And maybe one other person. I know Ozzy wants to as well. He's been listening this entire time. I think he has a lot to add on this because I know Ozzy's position on it. I've listened to all his videos. I think I do a decent job of showing why I agree with Ozzy, but Ozzy would obviously do a better job because these are actually things that have been talked about for a very long time. There are reasons why. I think that most people in the great debate community that are atheists tend to side with me, but there are people like MP that don't. Nestlig is on the fence sometimes. It's hard to tell, but it's something we do.
I think the usage is just personal. You have your usage, I have my usage, and it's just arbitrary.
But I agree with you with fish, though. Is that cool?
Yeah, yes.
So, but anyways,
well, if you want to know what an atheist thinks, you should ask an atheist.
Yes,
I agree. And if you want, but the same token, you want to know what an agnostic thinks, ask an agnostic. Don't tell them they're atheists.
Also,
there you go.
Right, yeah.
If you want to get real confused, ask an agnostic what they believe.
Yeah. ask an agnostic Jew, atheist, theist. No. But anyways, like I said, Steve, thank you very much for coming in. I'll be ending this soon. Please give your last word. I hope that you were entertained. These things, they get lively, but that's awesome.
Before I head off, and that is first of all, thank you very much for the conversation. I love debates. I love conversation, especially when I disagree with people. I hope it doesn't sound like anyone's really changed their mind, but maybe the perspective's been changed. Mine's been altered slightly. I hope that it'll be interesting to see where this goes. It's been fun, basically, is what I'm trying to say. But to clarify my point, because you clarified your point, I disagree with you. I think that if you take academic sources and you see how certain academic sources define atheism, you'll find that it fits the word that you're using. But if you ask people that call themselves atheist, then they're going to fit my definition. And that's what I think is true. I'm in a case where I can't present objective evidence, but I can, for example, like I'll post now, all of the colloquial definitions seem to fit what I'm saying. But great conversation, really interesting. And I just want to remind everyone that we've got the same goal. We're just disagreeing in how exactly we can achieve it. And that's doing us a disservice. It means that we're not presented in the best way that we can be, and that's a shame. So getting over this and really finding a banner to unite under is very important.
And that's why I think we'll have future discussions on it, right?
Yeah, no.
But I'd like to have more of an off-air. This way we can kind of, suss things out more. But
can I argue this fish thing off air?
No. There's still people that don't. There's still people that say we're not fish. All I'm saying is monophyletically we're fish. Anything else you can argue, I don't care. Monophyletically we are fish. That's a fact. Everybody agrees upon that.
I can explain it to him why it is a fact.
No, that's another hangout. That's another hangout. He's got to go. Okay, guys, thanks for watching the Sunday show. The show that has a shitty name because I couldn't think of anything better because I have no originality. So
colloquial in any sense. So you're probably right. Like maybe I do fit the definition of a fish. I know that me and fish fit the definition of chordata, for example. I wasn't aware that you could.
We'll get your book to read. You're not finished by Neil Shubin.
I don't want to read a whole book. I want to just know the definition.
I don't want to read a whole book. I've been there, done that.
Okay. Can I then do this off air with him?
Yeah, go. Well, he's probably going to go.
A few minutes.
Sure. All right, wave goodbye, everybody. I always give everybody the last word, but I gave Steve the last word, so I'm ending this. Good night, guys.